Anyone just joining, thank you very much, and thank you for putting up with the delay. My internet went out, and I believe it's because the power strip to which my router was connected seemed to have fried. Thankfully, it was one with surge protection and nothing was damaged, but that took a while to figure out. Be starting in just a couple minutes, but in the meantime, please enjoy this music. This is all music that was written during the time period, so 1300s, 1400s, actual medieval music, and it's quite jaunty and fun and should make a good background for the story time. In class, you'll get bonus points if you can correctly identify what castle we're looking at right now. I've actually been to this castle about 7 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly. The flag on it should be a giveaway, but I'll be very impressed if anybody guesses that. Okay. Given that it is now 8:45, I think it would be a good time to get started. So today, class, I will be reading Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It is one of the best known works of Middle English fiction, poetry from the late 14th century in the West Midlands of England or so. And it is an Arthurian story, as you probably guessed by the title, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, one of the Knights of the Round Table. So this is likely from late 14th century, West Midlands, England. I will be reading it in translation, as translated by J.R.R. Tolkien, who, aside from, writing The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, was a great scholar of Middle English poetry and literature. This is a fantastical story containing many elements of magic, kind of a test of chivalry, and some really beautiful language. The reason we're reading it in translation, whereas for something like the Canterbury Tales I read in the Middle English, is because the Middle English of the Gawain poet is significantly more complex, archaic, and difficult than Chaucer's Middle English, and I will show you what I mean. So the opening lines of this in Middle English, first you can see there's lots of letters that we don't use in English anymore. We've got the ash, we've got the orn, we've got the yoch, which are all sounds that we no longer incorporate in modern English. So something like this would read, Sidden de Seja and the assault wat ses de Troja, de bords Britain and Brent to Brondes Naskes, the twilch that the trames of Tresond der rocked, at treat where his treachery beats crust on earth. So it's much more difficult to understand and to read. So I will be doing myself and all of you a mercy by reading it in translation. Now, even in translation, there may be some things that sound strange to modern ears. So I will be going fairly slowly, and I will have the text on screen for everybody to follow along. Do let me know if the background music is a little too loud. Might turn it down just a tiny bit, lovely as it is. But I think as I read the story, I may intersperse some background on the structure of it. But I thought it was a good time to read this, given that there was just a new movie called The Green Knight, released very recently. I've not seen it yet. I want to, and I've heard excellent things about it. Oh, it's a hair loud. Thank you, Yulu. Let me turn that down a bit. How's that? Yeah, but given that there's a new movie based on this story and using these characters, I thought, good time to revisit the source. So, this is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, as translated by J.R.R. Tolkien. It's a story in 4 parts, and it is about 2,500 lines long. I am, however, going to zoom in to make this easier for you to read. Part 1. When the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, and the fortress fell in flame to firebrands and ashes, the traitor who the contrivance of treason there fashioned was tried for his treachery, the most true upon earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his renowned kindred who then laid under them lands, and lords became of well nigh all the wealth in the western isles. When royal Romulus to Rome his road had taken in great pomp and pride, he peopled it first, and named it with his own name that yet now it bears. Tyrius went to Tuscany, and towns founded. Langobard in Lombardy uplifted halls, and far over the French flood Felix Brutus on many a broad bank and brae Britain established, full fair, where strange things, strife and sadness, at whiles in the land did fare, and each other grief and gladness oft fast have followed there. And when fair Britain was founded by this famous lord, bold men were bred that Sorry, cat interrupting. Yes, Glimmy cat. You're not the cat that's interrupting. It's my cat that's interrupting, hopping on my desk. Yeah, alliteration off the charts. So, that's an interesting... Nope, you're not too late, Pig D4. I've just started, and good to see you, Kamiyana. So... it's good that you bring up the alliteration, because this is written in stanzas of alliterative verse that even at the time this was written was a throwback to older Anglo-Saxon poetry, which often focused on multiple pairs of alliterative words. So think of it as, you know, this is the late 1300s version of a throwback. And it's in what's called a rhyming bob and wheel structure. I'll maybe get into that a bit after, but it means that you have these really strong, stressed syllabic beats in each stanza. So, you know, things like, where strange things, strife and sadness, at whiles in the land did fare, and each other grief and gladness oft fast have followed there. It makes it really satisfying to read, and you would have to think this would be read or proclaimed, because it was imitating that style. Older Anglo-Saxon poetry, think something like Beowulf, which was probably around 800 AD. Oh, thank you so much for the subscription, Kamiyana. Really appreciate it. I think my alerts is not working, but that's all right, I saw it. Thank you very much. But that older style of poetry, something like Beowulf, would never have been written down contemporaneously. It was proclaimed in, mead halls or, castles by a shop, S-C-O-P, shop. Someone who would have a lyre or some sort of stringed instrument, a harp, and would declaim a story, in kind of a high chant sort of way. It's actually an excellent performance of Beowulf in Old English. I don't know if the whole thing's on YouTube, but by a man, I think his name was Benjamin Bagby, who built himself a lyre based on drawings of them that we have, and recites the whole thing in Old English. Now, Old English holds so little in common with modern English that it is functionally a different language. We can't understand it. Excuse me. Whereas even something like the Middle English of Gawain here, if I compare... Give me just a moment, and I will compare the first part here. In the Middle English on the right, Sithen the siege and the assault was cessed at Troia, the boards of Britain and Brent to bronzed and discussed the Turk that the Tramus of Trazon the Hrot was tried for his treachery, the truest on earth. It was Aeneas the Echthel and his high kinde that sithen the precious princes and patrons become well next of all the well, and it's much more difficult to read versus when the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, and the fortress fell in flames of firebrands and ashes. The Middle English of Gawain is so far removed from our modern English that, unlike Chaucer, it's not really intelligible for us. Or rather, it would be if I was better at reading the Gawain poet's Middle English. I'm not as experienced with that as I am at Chaucer. But you can feel, even in the translation, Tolkien went to great pains to maintain that alliterative feel. So it's a really marvelous translation that lets us get the full feeling, but still understand it. So let's continue. We were right at the second stanza when I went off on my tangent. We're getting now a historical context at the start of the poem for when and where and in what kind of world this story takes place. You know, it's an elevated world of courtly romance. Romance being the genre, not literally a love story. Think like capital R romance. It was very popular at the time because it's a genre full of the high ideals of chivalry, you know, lords and ladies, that kind of thing. But I get ahead of myself. And when fair Britain was founded by this famous lord, bold men were bred there who in battle rejoiced, and many a time that betide they troubles aroused. In this domain more marvels have by men been seen than in any other that I know of since that olden time. But of all that here abode in Britain as kings, ever was Arthur most honored, as I have heard men tell. Wherefore a marvel among men I mean to recall, a sight strange to see some men have held it, one of the wildest adventures of the wonders of Arthur. If you will listen to this lay but a little while now, I will tell it at once as in town I have heard it told, as it is fixed and fettered in story brave and bold, thus linked and truly lettered, as was loved in this land of old. This king lay at Camelot at Christmas-tide with many a lovely lord, lieges most noble indeed of the Table Round, all those tried brethren, amid merriment unmatched and mirth without care. These tourneyed many a time the trusty knights, and jousted full joyously these gentle lords, then to the court they came at carols to play. For there the feast was unfailing full 15 days, with all meats and all mirth that men could devise, such gladness and gaiety as was glorious to hear, din of voices by day, and dancing by night, all happiness at the highest in halls and in bowers, at the lords and the ladies, such as they loved most dearly. With all the bliss of this world they abode together, the knights most renowned after the name of Christ, and the ladies most lovely that ever life enjoyed, and he, king most courteous, who that court possessed. For all that folk so fair did in their first estate abide, under heaven the first in fame, their king most high in pride, it would now be hard to name a troop in war so tried. While New Year's was yet young that yester eve had arrived, that day double dainties on the dais were served, when the king was there come with his courtiers to the hall, and the chanting of the choir in the chapel had ended. With loud clamour and cries, both clerks and laymen Noel announced anew, and named it full often. Then nobles ran anon with New Year gifts. Hansels, Hansels, they shouted, and handed them out, competed for those presents in playful debate. Ladies laughed loudly, though they lost the game, and he that won was not woeful, as may well be believed. All this merriment they made, till their meat was served. Then they washed, and mannerly went to their seats, ever the highest for the worthiest, as was held to be best. Queen Guinevere the gay was with grace in the midst of the adorned dais set. Dearly was it arrayed, finest sandal at her sides, a ceiling above her of true tissue of Toulouse, and tapestries of Thargia that were embroidered and bound with the brightest gems one might prove and appraise to purchase for coin any day. That loveliest lady there on them glanced with eyes of grey, that he found ever one more fair, and soeth might no man say. But Arthur would not eat until all were served. His youth made him so merry with the moods of a boy. He liked light-hearted life. So loved he the less either long to be lying or long to be seated, so worked on him his young blood and wayward brain. And another rule, moreover, was his reason besides, that in pride he had appointed, it pleased him not to eat upon festivals so fair, ere he first were appraised of some strange story or stirring adventure, or some moving marvel that he might believe in of noble men, knighthood, or new adventures, or a challenger should come a champion seeking to join with him in jousting, in jeopardy to set his life against life, each allowing the other the favor of fortune were she fairer to him. This was the king's custom, wherever his court was holden, at each famous feast among his fair company and hall. So his face doth proud appear, and he stands up stout and tall, all young in the new year, much mirth he makes withal. Thus there stands up straight the stern king himself, talking before the high table of trifles courtly. There good Gawain was set at Guinevere's side, with Agravain a la Dourmain on the other side seated, both their lord's sister sons, loyal-hearted knights. Bishop Baldwin had the honor of the board service, and Ewain Urien's son ate beside him. These dined on the dais, and daintily fared, and many a loyal lord below at the long tables. Then forth came the first course, with fanfare of trumpets, on which many bright banners bravely were hanging. Noise of drums then anew, and the noble pipes, warbling wild and keen, wakened their music, so that many hearts rose high hearing their playing. Then forth was brought a feast, fare of the noblest, multitude of fresh meats on so many dishes that free places were few in front of the people to set the silver things full of soups on cloth so white. Each lord of his liking there without lack took with delight 12 plates to every pair, good beer and wine all bright. Now of their service I will say nothing more, for you are all well aware that no want would there be. Another noise that was new drew near on a sudden, so that their lord might have leave at last to take food. For hardly had the music but a moment ended, and the first course in the court, as was custom, been served, when there passed through the portals a perilous horseman, the mightiest on middle earth in measure of height, from his gorge to his girdle so great and so square, and his loins and his limbs so long and so huge, that half a troll upon the earth I trow that he was, but the largest man alive at least I declare him, and yet the seemliest for his size that could sit on a horse, for though in back and in breast his body was grim, both his paunch and his waist were properly slight, and all his features followed his fashion so gay in mode. For at the hue men gaped aghast in his face and form that showed, as a fey man fell he passed, all green, all over glowed. All of green were they made, both garments and man. A coat tight and close hung to his sides, a rich robe above it all arrayed within with fur finely trimmed, showing fair fringes of handsome ermine gay, as his hood was also, that was lifted from his locks and laid on his shoulders, and trim hose tight drawn of tincture alike that clung to his calves, and clear spurs below of bright gold on silk broideries banded most richly, though unshod were his shanks, for shoeless he rode. And verily all this vesture was of verdure clear, both the bars on his belt and the bright stones beside that were so richly arrayed in his array so fair, set on himself and on his saddle upon silk fabrics. It would be too hard to rehearse one half of the trifles that were embroidered upon them, what with birds and with flies and a gay glory of green, and ever gold in the midst. The pendants of his poitrel, his proud crupper, his molaines, and all the metal, to say more, were enamelled. Even the stirrups that he stood in were stained of the same, and his saddle bows and suit, and their sumptuous skirts, which ever glimmered and glinted all with green jewels. Even the horse that upheld him in hue was the same, I tell. A green horse, great and thick, a stallion stiff to quell, embroidered bridle quick, he matched his master well. Very gay was this great man, guised all in green, and the hair of his head with his horse's accorded. fair flapping locks enfolding his shoulders, a big beard like a bush over his breast hanging, that with the handsome hair from his head falling with sharp shorn to an edge just short of his elbows, so that half his arms under it were hid, as it were, in a king's capadoce that encloses his neck. The name of that mighty horse was of much the same sort, well curled and all combed, with many curious knots woven in gold wire about the wondrous green, ever a strand of the hair and a string of the gold. The tail and the top lock were twined all to match, and both bound with a band of brilliant green, with dear jewels bedight to the dock's ending, and twisted then on top was a tight knotted knot on which so many burnished bells of bright gold jingled. Such a mount on Middle-earth, or man to ride him, was never beheld in that hall with eyes ere that time, for there his glance was as lightning bright, so did all that saw him swear. No man would have the might, they thought, his elbows to bear. And yet he had not a helm, nor a hauberk either, nor a pisane, nor a plate that was proper to arms, not a shield, not a shaft, for shock or for blow, but in his one hand he held a holly bundle, that is greatest in greenery when groves are leafless, and an axe in the other, ugly and monstrous, a ruthless weapon aright for one in rhyme to describe. The head was as large and as long as an ell-wand, a branch of green steel and of beaten gold, the bit burnished bright and broad at the edge, as well shaped for shearing as sharp razors. The stem was a stout staff, by which sternly he gripped it, all bound with iron about to the base of the handle, and engraven in green and graceful patterns, lapped round with a lanyard that was lashed to the head and down the length of the haft was looped many times, and tassels of price were tied there in plenty to bosses of the bright green, braided most richly. Such was he that now hastened in, the hall entering, pressing forward to the dais. No peril he feared. To none gave he greeting, gazing above them. And the first word that he winged, "Now where is," he said, "the governor of this gathering? For gladly I would on the same set my sight, and with himself now talk in town." On the courtiers he cast his eye, and rolled it up and down. He stopped, and stared to espy who there had most renown. Then they looked for a long while on that lord gazing, for every man marvelled what it could mean indeed that horseman and horse such a hue should come by as to grow green as the grass, and greener, it seemed, than green enamel on gold, glowing far brighter. All stared that stood there and stole up nearer, watching him and wondering what in the world he would do. For many marvels they had seen, but to match this, nothing. Wherefore a phantom and fey magic folk there thought it. And so to answer little eager was any of those knights, and astounded at his stern voice, stone still they sat there in a swooning silence through that solemn chamber, as if all had dropped into a dream and died their voices away. Not only, I deem, for dread, but of some 'twas their courtly way to allow their lord and head to the guest his word to say. Then Arthur before the high dais beheld this wonder, and freely with fair words, for fearless was he ever, saluted him, saying, "Lord, to this lodging thou art welcome. The head of this household, Arthur my name is. Alight, as thou lovest me, and linger, pray thee. And what may thy wish be, and while we shall learn?" "Nay, so help me," quoth the horseman, "he that on high is throned, to pass any time in this place was no part of my errand. But since thy praises, prince, so proud are uplifted, and thy castle and courtiers are accounted the best, the stoutest in steel gear that on steeds may ride, most eager and honorable of the earth's people, valiant to vie within other virtuous sports, and here is knighthood renowned, as is noised in my ears, 'tis that has fetched me hither, by my faith, at this time. You may believe by this branch that I am bearing here that I pass as one in peace, no peril seeking. For had I set forth to fight in fashion of war, I have a hauberk at home, and a helm also, a shield, and a sharp spear shining brightly, and other weapons to wield too, as well I believe. But since I crave for no combat, my clothes are softer. Yet, if thou be so bold as abroad is published, thou wilt grant of thy goodness the game that I ask for by right." Then Arthur answered there and said, "Sir, noble knight, if battle thou seek thus bear, thou wilt not fail here to fight." Nay, I wish for no warfare, on my word I tell thee. Hereabout on these benches are but beardless children. Were I hasped in armor on a high charger, there is no man here to match me. Their might is so feeble. And so I crave in this court only a Christmas pastime, since it is Yule and New Year, and you are young here and merry. If any so hardy in this house here holds that he is, if so bold be his blood, or his brain be so wild, that he stoutly dare strike one stroke for another, then I will give him as my gift this gisarm costly, this axe, 'tis heavy enough, to handle as he pleases, and I will abide the first brunt, here, bear, as I sit. If any fellow be so fierce as my faith to test, hither, let him haste to me and lay hold of this weapon. I hand it over for ever, he can have it as his own, and I will stand a stroke from him, stock still on this floor, provided thou will lay down this law, that I may deliver him another. Blame I. And yet a respite I'll allow, till a year and a day go by. Come quick, and let's see now if any here dare reply. If he astounded them at first, yet stiller were then and all the household in the hall, both high men and low. The man on his mount moved in his saddle, and rudely his red eyes he rolled then about, bent his bristling brows all brilliantly green, and swept round his beard to see who would rise. When none in converse would accost him, he coughed then loudly, stretched himself haughtily, and straightway exclaimed, "What? Is this Arthur's house?" said he thereupon, "the rumour of which runs through realms unnumbered? Where now is your haughtiness and your high conquests, your fierceness and fell mood, and your fine boasting? Now are the revels in the royalty of the Round Table overwhelmed by a word one man spoken, for all blenched now abashed ere a blow is offered." With that he laughed so loud that their lord was angered. The blood shot for shame into his shining cheeks and face. So wroth as wind he grew, so all did in that place. Then near to the stout man drew, the king of fearless race, and said, "Marry, good man, 'tis madness thou asked, and since folly thou hast sought, thou deservest to find it. I know no lord that is alarmed by thy loud words here. Give me now thy gisarm, in God's name, sir, and I will bring thee the blessing thou hast begged to receive." Quick then he came to him and caught it from his hand. Then the lordly man loftily alighted on foot. Now Arthur holds his axe, and the haft grasping sternly he stirs it about, his stroke considering. The stout man before him there stood his full height, higher than any in that house by a head and yet more. With stern face as he stood, he stroked at his beard, and with expression impassive he pulled down his coat, no more disturbed or distressed at the strength of his blows than if someone as he sat had served him a drink of wine. From beside the queen, Gawain to the king did then incline. "I implore with prayer plain that this match should now be mine." "Would you, my worthy lord," said Gawain to the king, "bid me abandon this bench and stand by you there, so that I without discourtesy might be excused from the table, and my liege lady were not loath to permit me, I would come to your council before your courtiers fair. For I find it unfitting, as in fact it is held, when a challenge in your chamber makes choice so exalted, though you yourself be desirous to accept it in person. While many bold men about you on bench are seated, on earth there are, I hold, none more honest of purpose, no figures fairer on field where fighting is waged. I am the weakest, I am aware, and in wit feeblest, and the least loss if I live not, if one would learn the truth. Only because you are my uncle is honor given me. Save your blood in my body, I boast of no virtue. And since this affair is so foolish that it nowise befits you, and I have requested it first, accord it then to me. If my claim is uncalled for without cavil shall judge this court." The consult the knights draw near, and this plan they all support. The king with crown to clear, and give Gawain the sport. The king then commanded that he quickly should rise, and he readily uprose and directly approached, kneeling humbly before his highness, and laying hand on the weapon. And he lovingly relinquished it, and lifting his hand gave him God's blessing, and graciously enjoined him that his hand and his heart should be hardy alike. "Take care, cousin, quoth the king, one cut to a dress, and if thou learnest him his lesson, I believe very well that thou wilt bear any blow that he gives back later. Gawain goes to the great man with gisarm in hand, and he boldly abides there. He blenched not at all. Then next said to Gawain the knight all in green, Let's tell again our agreement ere we go any further. I'd know first, Sir Knight, thy name. I entreat thee to tell it me truly, that I may trust in thy word. In good faith, quoth the good knight, I, Gawain, am called, who bring thee this buffet. Let be what may follow. And at this time a 12-month in thy turn have another with whatever weapon thou wilt, and in the world with none else but me. The other man answered again, I am passing pleased, said he, upon my life, Sir Gawain, that this stroke should be struck by thee. Begad, said the Green Knight, Sir Gawain, I am pleased to find from thy fist the favour I asked for, and thou hast promptly repeated and plainly hast stated without abatement the bargain I begged of the king here, save that thou must assure me, sir, on thy honour, that thou wilt seek me thyself, search where thou thinkest I may be found, near or far, and fetch thee such payment as thou deliverest me today before these lordly people. Where should I light on thee? Quoth Gawain. Where look for thy place? I have never learned where thou livest, by the Lord that made me, and I know thee not, knight, thy name nor thy court. But teach me the true way, and tell me what men call thee, and I will apply all my purpose the path to discover, and that I swear thee for certain, and solemnly promise. That is enough in New Year, there is need of no more, said the great man in green to Gawain the courtly. If I tell thee the truth of it, when I have taken the knock, and thou handily hast hit me, if in haste I announce then my house and my home and mine own title, then thou canst call and inquire and keep the agreement. And if I waste not a word, thou'lt win better fortune, for thou mayst linger in thy land and look no further, but stay. To thy grim tool now take heed, sir. Let us try thy knocks today. Gladly, said he, indeed, sir. And his axe he stroked in play. So, class, if you're following, this massive man, not only clad in green, but green himself on a great green horse, burst into Arthur's court at Camelot during their Christmas feasting, of which we heard the description of 15 days of feasting with all dishes imaginable, and has demanded a Christmas game where he will hand over his monstrous gisarm, a big axe, and say, I want someone to hit me with this, and a year from now, I'll hit you with it. That's the Christmas game. Arthur was upset at this. Naturally, it's a ridiculous proposition. So, his nephew, Gawain, a young knight who proclaimed himself the weakest and the stupidest of everybody there, said, No, I'll do it. If I die doing this, it's no great loss. Yeah, he was absolutely medieval times chroma keyed Kamiyana. You wouldn't be able to see him on a green screen, or you'd just see the gold fill, the gold enamel on his, raiments. But he busts in and says, hit me with this axe, and I'll hit you with it in a year. Gawain takes up the bet, and now here comes the time for the first strike. I hope it's not too hard to follow. Very fun to read with the alliteration. So, the Green Knight on the ground now gets himself ready. Leaning a little with the head, he lays bare the flesh, and his locks long and lovely he lifts over his crown, letting the naked neck as was needed appear. His left foot on the floor before him placing, Gawain gripped on his axe, gathered and raised it. From aloft let it swiftly land where 'twas naked, so that the sharp of his blade shivered the bones, and sank clean through the clear fat and clove it asunder, and the blade of the bright steel then bit into the ground. The fair head to the floor fell from the shoulders, and folk fended it with their feet as forth it went rolling. The blood burst from the body, bright on the greenness, and yet neither faltered nor fell the fierce man at all. But stoutly he strode forth, still strong on his shanks, and roughly he reached out among the rows that stood there, caught up his comely head, and quickly upraised it, and then hastened to his horse, laid hold of the bridle, stepped into stirrup iron, and strode up aloft, his head by the hair in his hand holding, and he settled himself then in the saddle as firmly as if unharmed by mishap, though in the hall he might wear no head. His trunk he twisted round, that gruesome body that bled, and many fear then found, as soon as his speech was sped. For the head in his hand he held it up straight, toward the fairest at the table he twisted the face, and it lifted up its eyelids and looked at them broadly, and made such words with its mouth as may be recounted. See thou get ready, Gawain, to go as thou vowedst, and as faithfully seek till thou found me, good sir, as thou hast promised in this place in the presence of these knights. To the Green Chapel go thou, and get thee, I charge thee, such a dint as thou hast dealt. Indeed, thou hast earned a nimble knock in return on New Year's morning. The Knight of the Green Chapel I am known to many, so if to find me thou endeavor, thou wilt fail not to do so. Therefore come, or to be called a craven thou deservest. With a rude roar and rush his reins he turned then, and hastened out through the hall door with his head in his hand, and the fire of the flint flew from the feet of his charger. To what country he came in that court no man knew, no more than they had learned from what land he had journeyed. Meanwhile, the king and Sir Gawain at the Green Man laugh and smile, yet to men had appeared 'twas plain, a marvel beyond denial. Though Arthur the High King in his heart marvelled, he let no sign of it be seen, but said then aloud to the queen so comely with courteous words, Dear lady, today be not downcast at all. Such cunning play well becomes the Christmas tide, interludes and the like, and laughter and singing, amid these noble dances of knights and of dames. None the less to my food I may fairly betake me, for a marvel I have met, and I may not deny it. He glanced at Sir Gawain, and with good point he said, Come, hang up thine axe, sir, it is hewn now enough. And over the table they hung it on the tapestry behind, where all men might remark it, a marvel to see, and by its true token might tell of that adventure. Then to a table they turned, those two lords together, the king and his good kinsman, and courtly men served them with all dainties double, the dearest there might be, with all manner of meats, and with minstrelsy too. With delight that day they led, till to the land came the night again. Sir Gawain, now take heed, lest fear make thee refrain from daring the dangerous deed that thou in hand hast taken. There concludes part 1, class. And what a conclusion it is! Gawain cuts the Green Knight's head clean off in one stroke, the axe sinking all the way to the floor. And instead of falling over, the man walks over, picks up his head, gets on his horse, and says, I'll see you in a year, Gawain, for you to take the same blow from me. Now, class, if I was Gawain, I would be panicking a bit at this point, thinking, oh, so my head is next. Yeah, exactly. King Arthur was like, oh, it's just Christmas things. That's what happens. Guinevere, don't be upset. I know there's, blood all over the floor now. Let's eat. I've seen a marvel. I can have my food now. Arthur is a man of stronger stomach than me, because I feel like if I just saw a decapitated man ride off on his horse, I would probably lose my appetite. But then again, I suppose that's why he's a legend and I'm not. So why then don't we continue on with Part 2? With this earnest of high deeds, thus Arthur began the young year, for brave vows he yearned to hear made. Though such words were wanting when they went to table, now of fell work to full grasp filled were their hands. Gawain was gay as he began those games in the hall. But if the end be unhappy, hold it no wonder. Oh, one moment, class. I just realized that the chat is not appearing on screen. I'm very sorry for that. Let me fix that quickly. That's embarrassing. Give me one moment. Thought something looked wrong. I apologize for that. Let me test this out quickly. Nope. Okay, give me just one moment, class. I apologize for that. Whoops. Yes, OBS browser source. That's right. Okay. Let's try that again. There we go. My apologies, class. That is embarrassing. I just realized I was talking to you all for an hour and you couldn't see what each other were saying. Whoops. And I think that probably is the same for my sound alerts, so let me fix that as well. Apologies for the scuff. Moment. One second. I'll give that a quick test as well. Okay, yep, that's working now. Very sorry about that, class. That is embarrassing. But we're back now. So why don't I just restart part 2? Thank you for your patience, class. With this earnest of high deeds, thus Arthur began the young year. For brave vows he yearned to hear made. Though such words were wanting when they went to table, now of fell work to full grasp filled were their hands. Gawain was gay as he began those games in the hall, but if the end be unhappy, hold it no wonder. For though men be merry of mood when they have mightily drunk, a year slips by swiftly, never the same returning. The outset to the ending is equal but seldom, and so this Yule passed over, and the year after, and severally the seasons ensued in their turn. After Christmas there came the crabbed Lenten that with fish tries the flesh, and with food more meagre. But then the weather in the world makes war on the winter, cold creeps into the earth, clouds are uplifted, shining rain is shed in showers that all warm fall on the fair turf, flowers there open, of grounds and of groves green is the raiment. Birds are busy a-building, and bravely are singing for the sweetness of the soft summer that will soon be on the way. And blossoms bourgeon and blow, and hedgerows bright and gay. Then glorious musics go through the woods in proud array. After the season of summer with its soft breezes, when Zephyr goes sighing through seeds and herbs, right glad is the grass that grows in the open, when the damp dewdrops are dripping from the leaves to greet a gay glance of the glistening sun. But when harvest hurries in, and hardens it quickly, warns it before winter to wax to ripeness, he drives with his draught the dust, till it rises from the face of the land and flies up aloft. Wild wind in the welkin makes war on the sun, the leaves loosed from the linden alight on the ground, and all grey is the grass that green was before. All things ripen and rot that rose up at first, and so the year runs away in yesterdays many, and here winter wends again, as by the way of the world it ought, until the Michaelmas moon has winter's boding brought. Sir Gawain then full soon of his grievous journey thought. That's such a great description of a year and seasons passing by, kind of anthropomorphized. I really, really like that description, and that for me is what elevates this from just a tale of courtly romance to really one of the outstanding works of Middle English poetry. And yet, till All Hallows with Arthur he lingered, who furnished on that festival a feast for the night with much royal revelry of the Round Table. The knights of renown and noble ladies, all for the love of that lord, had longing at heart, but nevertheless the more lightly of laughter they spoke. Many were joyless who jested for his gentle sake, for after their meal mournfully he reminded his uncle that his departure was near, and plainly he said, "Now, liege lord of my life, for leave I beg you. You know the quest and the compact. I care not further to trouble you with tale of it, save a trifling point. I must set forth to my fate without fail in the morning, as God will guide me, the green man, to seek." Those most accounted in the castle came then together, Gawain and Eric, and others not a few, Sir Dodinel le Savage, the Duke of the Clarence, Lancelot and Lionel and Lucan the Good, Sir Bors and Sir Bedivere that were both men of might, and many others of mark with Medor de la Porte. All this company of the court the king now approached to comfort the knight with care in their hearts. Much mournful lament was made in the hall that one so worthy as Gawain should wend on that errand, to endure a deadly dint and deal no more with blade. The knight ever made good cheer, saying, "Why should I be dismayed? Of doom the fair or drear by a man must be essayed." Yeah, it's exactly like fast-forward time-elapse montage about, 600-something years before video. He remained there that day, and in the morning got ready, asked early for his arms, and they all were brought him. First a carpet of red silk was arrayed on the floor, and the gilded gear in plenty there glittered upon it. The stern man stepped thereon, and the steel things handled, dressed in a doublet of damask of Tharsia, and over it a cunning capadoce that was closed at the throat, and with fair ermine was furred all within. Then sabatons first he set on his feet, his legs lapped in steel in his lordly greaves, on which the polanes they placed, polished and shining, and knit upon his knees with knots all of gold. Then the comely cuisses that cunningly clasped, and thick thews of his thighs they with thongs on him tied. And next the byrnie, woven of bright steel rings upon costly quilting, closed him about, and armlets well burnished upon both of his arms, with gay elbow pieces, gloves of plate, and all the goodly gear to guard him whatever betide, coat armor richly made, gold spurs on heel in pride, girt with a trusty blade, silk belt about his side. You get kind of the medieval drip description there. He's got silk, he's got the finest armor there is. Gawain's looking good. When he was hasped in his armor, his harness was splendid. The least latchet or loop was all lit with gold. Not even memeing, it was all lit with gold. Hold on, clearing the cat off the desk. Okay. Cat wrangled, we can move on. Thus harnessed as he was now heard his mass, that was offered and honored at the high altar, and then he came to the king and his court companion, and with love he took leave of lords and of ladies, and they kissed him and discorded him, and to Christ him commended. And now Gringalet stood groomed, and girt with a saddle gleaming right gaily with many gold fringes, and all newly for the nonce nailed at all points, adorned with bars was the bridle, with bright gold banded, the appareling proud of poitrel and of skirts, and the crupper in caparison accorded with the saddle bows. All was arrayed in red, with rich gold studded, so that it glittered and glinted as a gleam of the sun. Then he in hand took the helm, and in haste kissed it strongly, was it stapled and stuffed within. It sat high upon his head, and was hasped at the back, and a light kerchief was laid o'er the beaver, all braided and bound with the brightest gems upon broad silk broidery, with birds on the seams, like popinjays depainted, here preening and there, turtles and true loves, entwined as thickly as if many seamstresses had the sewing full 7 winters in hand. The circlet of greater price his crown about did band, the diamond's point device their blazing bright did stand. Not to beat a dead horse here, but they're describing the circlet on his head as being, blazing bright with diamonds. So he's dripped out and has ice. Gawain's clearly looking good. I haven't seen the Green Knight movie, but I really hope that they stayed true to these descriptions, because it would be really wonderful to see that, exorbitant display of wealth that, a knight in King Arthur's court would have access to. But moving on. Then they brought him his blazon that was of brilliant jewels, with the pentacle depicted in pure hue of gold. By the baldric he caught it, and about his neck cast it. Right well and worthily it went with the knight. And why the pentacle is proper to that prince so noble, I intend now to tell you, though it may tarry my story. It is a sign that Solomon once set on a time, to betoken troth, as it is entitled to do, for it is a figure that it in 5 points holdeth, and each line overlaps and is linked with another, and every way it is endless, and the English I hear everywhere name it the endless knot. So it suits well this knight and his unsullied arms, for ever faithful in 5 points, and 5 times under each, Gawain as good was acknowledged and as gold refined, devoid of every vice and with virtues adorned. So there the pentangle painted new he on shield and coat did wear, as one of word most true and knight of bearing fair. First faultless was he found in his 5 senses, and next in the 5 fingers he failed at no time, and firmly on the 5 wounds all his faith was set that Christ received on the cross, as the creed tells us, and wherever the brave man into battle was come, on this beyond all things was his earnest thought, that ever from the 5 joys all his valor he gained that to heaven's courteous queen once came from her child. For which cause the knight had in comely wise on the inner side of his shield her image depainted, that when he cast his eyes thither his courage never failed. The 5th 5 that was used, as I find, by this knight was free giving and friendliness first before all, and chastity and chivalry ever changeless and straight, and piety surpassing all points. These perfect 5 were hasped upon him harder than on any man else. Now these 5 series, in sooth, were fastened on this knight, and each was knit with another and had no ending, but were fixed at 5 points that failed not at all, coincided in no line nor sundered either, not ending in any angle anywhere as I discover, wherever the process was put in play or passed to an end. Therefore on his shining shield was shaped now this knot, royally with red jewels upon red gold set. This is the pure pentangle as people of learning have taught. Now Gawain in brave array his lance at last hath caught. He gave them all good day, for evermore he thought. So we had a quick description there, and the author kind of says, I'm going to tell you about this pentangle imagery on Gawain, even if it delays my story, because it's important. And he lays out all the virtues that Gawain represents. Piety, faith, friendliness. He's got these perfect qualities of knightliness. And you know that if they're being brought up now, they're going to come back later. And it's kind of interesting that, they set out this image of Gawain, who we haven't really seen that much of in the story, but that any reader would have been familiar with as a character at the time. So we're being told essentially, look, this guy is as good a knight as there is. He upholds all these tenets of chivalry. He's faithful. He won't let anybody down. And I just think it's really interesting that it's framed as an aside almost. Let me see, what was the phrasing? And why the pentangle is proper to that prince, I intend now to tell you. It's so important that we have an aside. I just thought that was very interesting. So, let's continue on. Now Gawain says goodbye to people, he thinks, for the last time, because, he's going to go have his head chopped off. So, say your goodbyes. He spurned his steed with the spurs and sprang on his way so fiercely that the flint sparks flashed out behind him. All who beheld him so honorable in their hearts were sighing. Oh, medieval music ran out, and it started on Hololive Lo-Fi. Let me fix that, class. Just one moment. Not that I don't like that, but I think the medieval's a little more fitting. Okay, but now Gawain's leaving, and people are remarking on it. He spurned his steed with the spurs and sprang on his way so fiercely that the flint sparks flashed out behind him. All who beheld him so honorable in their hearts were sighing, and assenting in sooth one said to another, grieving for that good man, Before God, 'tis a shame that thou, Lord, must be lost, who art in life so noble. To meet his match among men, marry, 'tis not easy. To behave with more heed would have behooved one of sense, and that dear Lord duly a duke to have made, illustrious leader of liegemen in this land as befits him, and that would better have been than to be butchered to death, beheaded by an elvish man for an arrogant vaunt. Who can recall any king that such a course ever took as knights quibbling at court at their Christmas games? Many warm tears outwelling there watered their eyes when that lord so beloved left the castle that day. No longer he abode, but swiftly went his way. Bewildering ways he rode, as the book I heard doth say. Yeah, that Hololive Lo-Fi, I love putting that on in the background when I'm doing work for something. Just a good, chill kind of thing. So Gawain's leaving and everybody's like, boy, it's a shame that Gawain's going to get butchered by a weird green man. Those knights in their Christmas games. Now he rides thus arrayed through the realms of Logres, Sir Gawain in God's care, though no game know he found it. Oft forlorn and alone he lodged of a night, where he found not afforded him such fare as pleased him. He had no friend but his horse in the forests and hills, no man on his march to commune with but God, till anon he drew near unto northern Wales. All the isles of Anglesey he held on his left, and over the fords he fared, by the flats near the sea, and then over by the Holyhead to high land again. In the wilderness of Wirral there wandered but few who with good will regarded either god or mortal. And ever he asked as he went on of all whom he met if they had heard any news of a knight that was green in any ground thereabouts, or of the Green Chapel. And all denied it, saying nay, and that never in their lives a single man had they seen that of such a colour could be. The knight took pathways strange by many a lonesome lea, and oft his view did change that chapel ere he could see. Now I just wanted to point out, class, since we were given some concrete geographical details there, that Gawain at this point has wandered into, Wales, which is why the picture behind me is of Cardiff Castle in Wales. I just thought it would be a fitting thing. I also had a castle interior prepared that I forgot to use, though this doesn't quite fit. This is not a Welsh or English castle. This is Neuschwanstein in either Germany or Austria. I forget which. But also fitting. But given that this story takes place largely in Wales, or the West Midlands of England, seemed fitting. Did you recognize Cardiff Castle, Kamiana, but couldn't put a name to it? It is a gorgeous Motte and Bailey style castle, remarkably well preserved. Actually, the outer walls of it were repurposed during World War II. They dug tunnels in the interior of the exterior walls, the Bailey, of Cardiff Castle as a bomb shelter for the residents of Cardiff during the Blitzkrieg, during the bombings. Super interesting. If you ever get the chance to go to Wales, highly recommend giving it a visit. But let's see Gawain's journey continue through the Welsh countryside. Many a cliff he climbed o'er in countries unknown, far fled from his friends without fellowship he rode. At every wading or water on the way that he passed, he found a foe before him, save it few for a wonder, and so foul were they and fell that fight he must needs. So many a marvel in the mountains he met in those lands, that 'twould be tedious the 10th part to tell you thereof. At while with worms he wars, and with wolves also. At whiles with wood trolls that wandered in the crags, and with bulls and with bears and boars too at times, and with ogres that hounded him from the heights of the fells. Had he not been stalwart and staunch and steadfast in God, he doubtless would have died, and death had met often. For though war wearied him much, the winter was worse, when the cold clear water from the clouds spilling froze ere it had fallen upon the faded earth. Well nigh slain by the sleet, he slept ironclad more nights than enow in the naked rocks, where clattering from the crest the cold brook tumbled, and hung high o'er his head in hard icicles. Thus in peril and pain, and in passes grievous, till Christmas Eve that country he crossed all alone in need. The knight did at that tide his plaint to Mary plead, her riders rode to guide and to some lodging lead. I find it really interesting that here the narrator tells us, so while Gawain was going there, he ran into trolls and bears and boars, and he fought so many evil things, but I don't have time to tell you about it. But trust me, he did really brave stuff, and it was really cold. It's like, we have to be assured that, Oh, a lot of exciting stuff happened, but I'm not going to tell you about that part. I'm going to get on with the story. Like if you have a friend who embellishes stories, it's like, did that really happen? It's interesting to me that think, our style of telling stories hasn't really changed ever for as long as we've been telling stories. We embellish, we add details, we want people to seem like a character in a story. He's absolutely grinding for EXP. Want some ogres? That's gotta be a level up right there. Especially since he's by himself, he's not splitting the EXP with anybody. That makes me wonder if there's ever been a video game adaptation of Gawain and the Green Knight. I wouldn't be surprised if there was. I should look for that. But let's see. He's now prayed to Mary in desperation for some lodging to get him out of the cold and the sleet. By a mount in the morning, merrily he was riding into a forest that was deep and fearsomely wild, with high hills at each hand, and hoar woods beneath of huge aged oaks by the hundred together. The hazel and the hawthorn were huddled and tangled, with rough, ragged moss around them trailing, with many birds bleakly on the bare twigs sitting that piteously piped there for pain of the cold. The good man on Gringalet goes now beneath them through many marshes and mires, a man all alone, troubled lest a truant at that time he should prove from the service of the sweet lord, who on that selfsame night of a maid became man our morning to conquer. And therefore sighing he said, I beseech thee, O Lord, and Mary, who is the mildest mother most dear, for some harbour where with honour I might hear the mass in thy matins tomorrow. This meekly I ask, and thereto promptly I pray with pater and ave and creed. In prayer he now did ride, lamenting his misdeed. He blessed him oft and cried, The cross of Christ me speed. Here we have Gawain regretting that he's missing Christmas Mass. And we heard earlier as he set out on his journey, he's a very devout knight of faith. So for him, missing the Mass and the Matins, which is a later in the day Mass, is extremely troubling to him. So he's praying, find me some church, somewhere I can go hear the service, or else I'll be, a truant, a delinquent knight. And that would be grievous injury to his, sense of self, really. The sign on himself he had set but thrice, ere a mansion he marked within a moat in the forest, on a low mound above a lawn, laced under the branches of many a burly bole round about by the ditches. The castle most comely that ever a king possessed, placed amid a pleasance with a park all about it, within a palisade of pointed pales set closely that took its turn round the trees for 2 miles or more. Gawain from the one side gazed on the stronghold as it shimmered and shone through the shining oaks, and then humbly he doffed his helm, and with honour he thanked Jesus and Saint Julian, who generous are both, who had courtesy accorded him, and to his cry hearkened. Now, bon hostel, quoth the knight, I beg of you still. Then he goaded Gringalet with his gilded heels, and he chose by good chance the chief pathway, and brought his master bravely to the bridge's end at last. The brave bridge was uphauled, the gates were bolted fast. The castle was strongly walled, it feared no wind or blast. Quick note, I'm sure you figured it out, Gringalet is his horse. And as a fun aside, that was what I called my car when I was in undergrad. I had taken a course in Middle English and had just bought a car and was thinking, what should I call this car? And then I thought, yes, Gawain's horse. It's a deeply nerdy anecdote about your professor there, class. Then he stayed his steed, that on the step bank halted above the deep double that was drawn round the place. The wall waded in the water wondrous deeply, and up again to a huge height in the air it mounted, of all hard-hewn stone to the high cornice, fortified under the battlement in the best fashion, and topped with fair turrets, set by turns about that had many graceful loopholes with a good outlook. That night a better barbican had never seen built. And inwards he beheld the hall uprising, all towers set in turns, and as tines clustering the fair finials, joined featly, so fine and so long, their capstones all carven with cunning and skill. Many chalk-white chimneys he chanced to espy upon the roofs of towers all radiant white, So many a painted pinnacle was peppered about among the crenels of the castle, clustered so thickly that all pared out of paper it appeared to have been. The gallant knight on his great horse good enough thought it, if he could come by any course that enclosure to enter, the harbour in that hostel while the holy day lasted with delight. He called, and there came with speed a porter blithe and bright. On the wall he learned his need, and hailed the errant knight. "Good sir," quoth Gawain, "will you go with my message to the high lord of this house for harbour to pray?" "Yes, by Peter," quoth the porter, "and I promise indeed that you will, sir, be welcome while you wish here to stay." Then quickly the man went, and came again soon, servants bringing civilly to receive there the knight. They drew down the great drawbridge, and duly came forth, and on the cold earth on their knees in courtesy knelt to welcome this wayfarer with such worship as they knew. They delivered him the broad gates, and laid them wide open, and he readily bade them rise, and rode o'er the bridge. Several servants then seized the saddle as he alighted, and many stout men his steed to a stable then led, while knights and esquires anon descended to guide there in gladness this guest to the hall. When he raised up his helm, many ran there in haste to have it from his hand, his highness to serve. His blade and his blazon both they took charge of. Then he greeted graciously those good men all, and many were proud to approach him, that prince to honour. All hasped in his harness to hall they brought him, where a fair blaze in the fireplace fiercely was burning. Then the lord of that land, leaving his chamber, came mannerly to meet the man on the floor. He said, "You are welcome at your wish to dwell here. What is here, all is your own, to have in your rule and sway." "Gramercy," quoth Gawain, "may Christ you this repay." As men that to meet were fain, they both embraced that day. Gawain gazed at the good man who had greeted him kindly, and he thought bold and big was the baron of the castle, very large and long, and his life at the prime. Broad and bright was his beard, and all beaver-hued. Stern, strong in his stance upon stalwart legs, his face fell as fire, and frank in his speech, and well it suited him, in sooth, as it seemed to the knight, a lordship to lead untroubled over lieges trusty. To a chamber the lord drew him, and charged men at once to assign him an esquire to serve and obey him, and there to wait on his word many worthy men were, who brought him to a bright bower where the bedding was splendid. There were curtains of costly silk with clear golden hems, and coverlets cunning wrought with quilts most lovely of bright ermine above, embroidered at the sides, hangings running on ropes with red gold rings, carpets of costly damask that covered the walls and the floor underfoot fairly to match them. There they despoiled him, speaking to him gaily, his byrnie doing off and his bright armor. Rich robes then readily men ran to bring him, for him to change, and to clothe him, having chosen the best. As soon as he had donned one, and dressed was therein, as it sat on him seemly with its sailing skirts, then verily in his visage Then verily in his visage a vision of spring to each man there appeared, and in marvellous hues bright and beautiful was all his body beneath. That knight more noble was never made by Christ, they thought. He came none knew where from, but it seemed to them he ought to be a prince beyond compare in the field where fell men fought. So Gawain shows up. I'll give you 3 guesses who the lord of this house is, class, but I think you'll only need one. But he shows up and is welcomed as a guest and is treated to all this finery of a wonderful bedchamber and silken robes, and he's attended to by the servants of the house. And now it's time for a Christmas feast. The chair before the chimney where charcoal was burning was made ready in his room, all arrayed and covered with cushions upon quilted cloths that were cunningly made. Then a comely cloak was cast about him of bright silk brocade, embroidered most richly and furred fairly within with fells of the choicest, and all edged with ermine, and its hood was to match. And he sat in that seat seemly and noble, and warmed himself with a will, and then his woes were amended. Soon up on good trestles a table was raised, and clad with a clean cloth clear white to look on. There was surnape, salt cellar, and silver spoons. He then washed as he would, and went to his food, and many worthy men with worship waited upon him. Soups they served of many sorts, seasoned most choicely, in double helpings as was due, and diverse sorts of fish, some baked in bread, some broiled on the coals, some seethed, some in gravy savored with spices, and all with condiments so cunning that it caused him delight. A fair feast he called it frankly and often, graciously, when all the good men together there pressed him. Now pray this penance deign to take, 'twill improve another day. The man much mirth did make, for wine to his head made way. Basically, Gawain shows up, is given a great feast with lots of different fish dishes, and gets a little drunk. I mean, as one does. Then inquiry and question were carefully put, touching personal points to that prince himself, till he courteously declared that to the court he belonged that high Arthur in honour held in his sway, who was the right royal king of the Round Table, and 'twas Gawain himself that was their guest now sat, and had come for that Christmas, as the case had turned out. When the lord had learned whom luck had brought him, loud laughed he thereat, so delighted he was, and they made very merry, all the men in that castle, and to appear in the presence were pressing and eager of one who all profit and prowess and perfect manners comprised in his person, and praise ever gained, of all men on Middle-earth he was most admired. Softly each then said in secret to his friend, Now, fairly shall we mark the fine points of manners, and the perfect expressions of polished converse. How speech is well spent will be expound unasked, since we have found here this fine father of breeding. God has given us of his goodness, his grace now indeed, who such a guest as Gawain has granted us to have. When blissful men at board for his birth sing blithe at heart, what manners high may mean this knight will now impart. Who hears him will, I ween, of love speech learn some art. Basically, they're saying, come on, Gawain, give us a speech. You're of such lordly manners and breeding that surely your speech will fill us with, anyone who hears him will learn more of, love speech. They'll learn that art. They're really flattering Gawain here. But it's kind of driving home the point of what a fair knight he is, regarded not just by those of the Round Table, but of everybody. When his dinner was done, and he duly had risen, it now to the night time very near had drawn. The chaplains then took to the chapel their way, and rang the bells richly, as rightly they should, for the solemn evensong of the high season. The lord leads the way, and his lady with him, into a goodly oratory gracefully she enters. Gawain follows gladly, and goes there at once, and the lord seizes him by the sleeve, and to a seat leads him, kindly acknowledges him, and calls him by his name, saying that most welcome he was of all guests in the world. And he grateful thanks gave him, and each greeted the other, and they sat together soberly while the service lasted. Then the lady longed to look at this knight, and from her closet she came, with many comely maidens. She was fairer in face, in her flesh and her skin, her proportions, her complexions, and her port than all others, and more lovely than Guinevere to Gawain she looked. He came through the chapel to pay court to her grace, leading her by the left hand. Another lady was there, who was older than she, indeed ancient she seemed, and held in high honour by all men about her. But unlike in their looks those ladies appeared, for if the younger was youthful, yellow was the older, with rose hue the one face was richly mantled, rough wrinkled cheeks rolled on the other. On the kerchiefs of the one many clear pearls were, her breast and bright throat were bare displayed, fairer than white snow that falls on the hills. The other was clad with a cloth that enclosed all her neck. Enveloped was her black chin with chalk-white veils, her forehead folded in skin, and so fumbled all up, so topped up and trinketed, and with trifles bedecked, that naught was bare of that beldame but her brows all black, her 2 eyes, and her nose, and her naked lips, and those were hideous to behold, and horribly bleared. That a worthy dame she was may well, 'fore God be said. Short body and thick waist, with bulging buttocks spread, more delicious to the taste was the one she by her led. So Gawain here, or the narrator rather, is describing Gawain looking at 2 ladies of the house. One, presumably the Lord's lady, who is as beautiful in complexion and proportion as anyone Gawain's ever seen, even more so than Guinevere. And she's being led by the hand by this old crone with squat proportion and cracked lips, and she's all covered up except for barely her face. You know, I think of like in Game of Thrones, like Olenna Tyrell. You know, like the old matriarch type character. I think I got the name right. It's been a while since I've read that. But, let's see, is Gawain tempted? When Gawain glimpsed that gay lady that so gracious looked, with leave sought of the lord toward the ladies he went. The elder he saluted, low to her bowing. About the lovelier he laid then lightly his arms, and kissed her in courtly wise, with courtesy speaking. His acquaintance they requested, and quickly he begged to be their servant in sooth, if they so desired. They took him between them, and talking they led him to a fireside in a fair room, and first of all called for spices, which men sped without sparing to bring them, and ever wine therewith well to their liking. The lord, for their delight, leaped up full often, many times merry games being minded to make. His hood he doffed, and on high he hung it on a spear, and offered it as an honour for any to win who the most fun could devise at that Christmas feast. And I shall try, by my troth, to contend with the best ere I forfeit this hood with the help of my friends. Thus with laughter and jollity the lord made it jest, to gladden Sir Gawain with games that night in hall, until the time was due that the lord for lights should call. Sir Gawain with leave withdrew, and went to bed withal. So basically after Mass, they just all go and have a nice little party, playing games. But has Gawain forgotten his errand? You've got something to do, buddy. On the morn, when every man remembers the time that our dear Lord for our doom to die was born, and every home wakes happiness on earth for his sake. So did it there on that day with the dearest delights. At each meal and at dinner marvelous dishes men set on the dais, the daintiest meats. The old ancient woman was highest at table. Meetly to her side the master he took him. Gawain and the gay lady together were seated in the centre, whereas was seemly the service began, and so on through the hall as honour directed. When each good man in his degree without grudge had been served, there was food, there was festival, there was fullness of joy, and to tell all the tale of it I should tedious find, though pains I might take every point to detail. Yet I ween that Gawain and that woman so fair in companionship took such pleasure together in sweet society, soft words speaking, their courteous converse clean and clear of all evil, that with their pleasant pastime no prince's sport compares. Drums beat and trumps men wind, many pipers play their airs, each man his deeds did mind, and they too minded theirs. But basically, Gawain and this lady are getting on great, but it's worth pointing out, they say their courteous conversation, clean and clear of all evil. So Gawain does not have untowards intentions for this lady. He's just a perfect gentleman, and they're enjoying each other's company, perfectly, as one might. With much feasting they fared the first and the next day, and as heartily the third came hastening after. The gaiety of St. John's Day was glorious to hear, with cheer of the choicest childermas followed, and that finished their revels as folk there intended, for there were guests who must go in the grey morning. So a wondrous wake they held, and the wine they drank, and danced on, and dearly they carolled. At last, when it was late, their leave then they sought to wend on their ways, each worthy stranger. Good day, then, said Gawain, but the good man stayed him, and led him to his own chamber to the chimney corner, and there he delayed him, and lovingly thanked him, for the pride and pleasure his presence had brought, for so honouring his house at that high season, and deigning his dwelling to adorn with his favour. Believe me, sir, while I live my luck I shall bless that Gawain was my guest at God's own feast. Gramercy, sir, said Gawain, but the goodness is yours, and all the honour is your own. May the high king repay you. And I am under your orders what you ask to perform. I am bound now to be, for better or worse, by right. Him longer to retain, the lord then pressed the knight. To him replied Gawain, that he by no means might. I am very say-so, Sir Gawain. I mean, literally, though, that's kind of the vibe we've got going on. Gawain's a good boy. He doesn't want to get mixed up with anything. He's just a very good knight. But the Lord is asking, you need to stay longer. Gawain's saying, I can't do that. So let's go on. Then, with courteous question, he inquired of Gawain what dire need had driven him on that festal date with such keenness from the king's court to come forth alone ere wholly the holidays from men's home had departed. In sooth, sir, he said, you say but the truth. A high errand and a hasty from that house brought me, where I am summoned myself to seek for a place, though I wonder where in the world I must wander to find it. I would not miss coming nigh it on New Year's morning for all the land in Logres, so our Lord help me. And so, this question I inquire of you here, can you tell me in truth if you tale ever heard of the Green Chapel, on what ground it may stand, and of the great knight that guards it, all green in his colour? For the terms of a tryst were between us established to meet that man at that mark if I remained alive, and the named New Year is now nearly upon me, and I would look upon that Lord, if God will allow me, more gladly, by God's Son, that gain any treasure. So indeed, if you please, depart now I must. For my business I have now but barely 3 days, and I would fainer fall dead than fail in my errand. Then laughing said the Lord, Now linger you must, for when 'tis time to that tryst I will teach you the road. On what ground is the Green Chapel? Let it grieve you no more. In your bed you shall be, sir, till broad is the day, without fret, and then fare on the first of the year, and come to the market mid-morn, there to make what play you know. Remain till New Year's Day, then rise and riding go. We'll set you on your way. 'Tis but 2 miles or so. So Gawain's lucked out. He's only 2 miles away from this Green Chapel, and he's got 3 days left to rest and hang out with this, really cool lord. Then was Gawain delighted, and in gladness he laughed. Now I thank you 1,000 times for this beyond all. Now my quest is accomplished, as you crave it. I will dwell a few days here, and else do what you order. The Lord then seized him and set him in a seat beside him, and let the ladies be sent for to delight them the more, for their sweet pleasure there in peace by themselves. For love of him that Lord was as loud in his mirth as one near out of his mind, who scarce knew what he meant. Then he called to the knight, crying out loudly, You have promised to do whatever deed I propose. Will you hold this behest here at this moment? Yes, certainly, sir, then said the true knight. While I remain in your mansion, your command I'll obey. Well, returned he, you have travelled and toiled from afar, and then I've kept you awake. You're not well yet, not cured. Both sustenance and sleep 'tis certain you need. Upstairs you shall stay, sir, and stop there in comfort tomorrow till mass time, and to a meal then go when you wish with my wife, who with you shall sit and comfort you with her company till to court I return. You stay, and I shall early rouse, and a hunting wend my way. Gawain gracefully bows. Your wishes I will obey. One thing more, said the master. We'll make an arrangement. Whatever I win in the wood at once shall be yours, and whatever you gain may get you shall give in exchange. Shall we swap thus, sweet man? Come, say what you think, whether one's luck be light or one's lot be better. By God, quoth Gawain, I agree to it all, and whatever play you propose seems pleasant to me. Done. 'Tis a bargain. Who'll bring us the drink? So said the lord of that land. They laughed, one and all. They drank, and they dallied, and they did as they pleased, the lords and ladies, as long as they wished. And then with customs of France and many courtly phrases they stood in sweet debate and soft words bandied, and lovingly they kissed, their leave taking. With trusty attendants and torches gleaming, they were brought at the last to their beds so soft, one and all. Yet ere to bed they came, he the bargain did oft recall. He knew how to play a game, the old governor of that hall. So Gawain has now been given another bargain. To return, the Lord will go out hunting each morning. He will give Gawain whatever he gets in the hunt, and Gawain must give him whatever he gets here in the hall. Seems like a good deal. Or is it? Let's find out in part 3. Before the first daylight, the folk uprose. The guests that were to go for their grooms they called, and they hurried up in haste horses to saddle, to stow all their stuff and strap up their bags. The men of rank arrayed them, for riding got ready. The saddle leaped swiftly, seized then their bridles, and went off on their ways where their wish was to go. The liege lord of the land was not last of them all to be ready to ride with a rout of his men. He ate a hurried mouthful after the hearing of mass, and with horn to the hunting field he hastened at once. When daylight was opened yet dimly on earth, he and his huntsmen were up on their high horses. Then the leaders of the hounds leashed them in couples, unclosed the kennel door, and cried to them, "Out!" and blew boldly on bugles 3 blasts full long. Eagles bayed thereat, a brave noise making, and they whipped and wheeled in those that wandered on a scent. 100 hunting dogs I have heard, of the best were they. To their stations keepers passed, the leashes were cast away, and many a rousing blast woke din in the woods that day. At the first burst of the baying, all beasts trembled. Deer dashed through the dale by dread bewildered, and hastened to the heights, but they hotly were greeted and turned back by the beaters, who boldly shouted. They let the harts go past with their high antlers, and the brave bucks also with their branching palms, for the lord of the castle had decreed in the close season that no man should molest the male of the deer. The hinds were held back with "Hey!" and "Where?" The does driven with great din to the deep valleys. There could be seen let slip a sleet of arrows. At each turn under the trees went a twanging shaft that into browned hides bit hard with barbed head. Lo, they brayed, and they bled, and on the banks they died. And ever the hounds in haste hotly pursued them, and hunters with high horns hurried behind them with such a clamor and cry as if cliffs had been riven. If any beast broke away from bowmen their shooting, it was snatched down and slain at the receiving station. When they had been harried from the height and hustled to the waters, the men were so wise in their craft as the watches below, and their greyhounds were so great that they got them at once, and flung them down in a flash, as fast as men could see with sight. The lord, then wild for joy, did oft spur and oft alight, and thus in bliss employ that day till dark of night. That was just a quite exciting description of a medieval hunting scene. You know, dogs loosed, people corralling the animals from either side. Very interesting and probably very accurate to the practice of the time, and I imagine a scene that would be familiar to any courtly listener of this, 700 years ago. Thus in his game, the lord goes under greenwood eaves, and Gawain the bold lies in goodly bed, lazing till the walls are lit by the light of day under costly coverlet with curtains about him. And as in slumber he strayed, he heard stealthily come a soft sound at his door as it secretly opened, and from under the clothes he craned then his head, a corner of the curtain he caught up a little, and looked that way warily to learn what it was. It was the lady herself, most lovely to see, that cautiously closed the door quietly behind her and drew near to his bed. Then abashed was the knight, and lay down swiftly to look as if he slept, and she stepped silently and stole to his bed, cast back the curtain, and crept then within, and sat her down softly on the side of his bed, and there lingered very long to look for his waking. He lay there lurking a long while and wondered, and mused in his mind how the matter would go, to what point it might pass. To some surprise, he fancied. Yet he said to himself, "More seemly 'twould be in due course with question to inquire what she wishes." Then rousing, he rolled over, and round to her turning, he lifted his eyelids with a look as of wonder, and signed him with the cross, thus safer to be kept aright. With chin and cheeks so sweet of blended red and white, with grace then him did greet, small lips with laughter bright. So Gawain is sleeping till after the sun's come up and has lit up his chambers, and suddenly this guy's wife comes creeping in and sits on his bed. He's panicking a little bit. He gave himself the sign of the cross. Gawain's freaking out a little bit. Like, what is this man's wife doing here? What am I doing? Oh no. Let's see what she's up to. "Good morning, Sir Gawain," said that gracious lady. "You are a careless sleeper if one can creep on you so. Now quickly you are caught. If we come not to terms, I shall bind you in your bed, you may be assured." With laughter the lady thus lightly jested. "Good morning to your grace," said Gawain gaily. "You shall work on me your will, and well I am pleased, for I submit immediately, and for mercy I cry, and that is best, as I deem, for I am obliged to do so." Thus he jested in return with much gentle laughter. "But if you would, lady gracious, then leave grant me, and release your prisoner, and pray him to rise. I would abandon this bed, and better array me, the more pleasant would it prove than to parley with you." "Nay, forsooth, fair sir," said the sweet lady, "you shall not go from your bed. I will govern you better. Here fast shall I enfold you, on the far side also, and then talk with my true knight that I have taken so. For I wot well intend that Sir Gawain you are, to whom all men pay homage wherever you ride. Your honour, your courtesy, by the courteous is praised, by lords, by ladies, by all living people. And right here you now are, and we all by ourselves. My husband and his huntsmen far hence have ridden. Other men are abed, and my maids also. The door closed and caught with a clasp that is strong. And since I have in this house one that all delight in, my time to account I will turn, while for talk I chance have still. To my body will you welcome be of delight to take your fill, or need constraineth me to serve you, and I will. Red alert, Gawain. Red alert. She is absolutely laying down the medieval. To my body you, to my body will you welcome be of delight to take your fill. Yeah, that's dangerous, Gawain. Upon my word, said Gawain, that is well, I guess, though I am not now he of whom you are speaking. To attain to such honour as here you tell of, I am a knight unworthy, as well indeed I know, by God. I would be glad, if good to you seemed whatever I could say, or in service could offer to the pleasure of your excellence, it would be pure delight. In good faith, Sir Gawain, said the gracious lady, the prowess and the excellence that all others approve, if I scorned or descried them, it were scant courtesy. But there are ladies in number who would now have thee in their hold, sir, as I have thee here, pleasantly to play with in polished converse, their solace to seek and their sorrows to soothe, than great part of the goods or gold that they own. But I thank him who on high of heaven is the Lord that I have here wholly in my hand what all desire by grace. She was an urgent wooer, that lady fair of face. The knight, with speeches pure, replied in every case. Madam, said he merrily, Mary reward you, for I have enjoyed in good faith your generous favour, and much honour have had else from others' kind deeds. But as for the courtesy they accord me, since my claim is not equal, the honour is your own, who are ever well-meaning. Nay, Mary, the lady demurred, as for me, I deny it. For were I worth all the legion of women alive, and all the wealth in the world at my will possessed, if I should exchange at my choice and choose me a husband for the noble nature I know, Sir Knight, in thee here, in beauty and bounty and bearing so gay, of which earlier I have heard and hold it now true, then no lord alive would I elect before you. In truth, lady, he returned, you took one far better. But I am proud of the praise you are pleased to give me, and as your servant, in earnest, my sovereign I hold you, and your knight I become, and may Christ reward you. Thus of many matters they spoke, till mid-morn was past, and ever the lady demeaned her as one that loved him much, and he fenced with her featly, ever flawless in manner. Though I were lady most lovely, thought the lady to herself, the less love would he bring here, since he looked for his bane, that blow, that him so soon should grieve, and needs it must be so. Then the lady asked her leave, and at once he let her go. So for all the flirting, Gawain is just deflecting left and right. Like, oh, if I could choose any husband in the entire world, it would be you. And he's like, nope, you chose a better one than me. Thank you. That's very kind. I'm your knight. I'm at your disposal. Please go. Gawain's basically doing the medieval begone thought here. You know, politely. Yeah, not husband, only friend. It's the reverse Nene. He's like, nope, I'm your knight, your husband. She's like, you know, my husband is out hunting with all his huntsmen, and there's nobody here, Gawain. He's like, yep, that's nice. That's nice. Please leave. So she eventually leaves. Then she gave him good day, and with a glance she laughed. And as she stood, she astonished him with the strength of her words. Now he that prospers all speech for this disport repay you, but that you should be Gawain, it gives me much thought. Why so? Then eagerly the knight asked her, afraid that he had failed in the form of his converse. But God bless you, for this reason, blithely she answered, that one so good as Gawain the Gracious is held, who all the compass of courtesy includes in his person, so long with a lady could hardly have lingered without craving a kiss, as a courteous knight, by some tactful turn that their talk led to. Then said Gawain, Very well, as you wish be it done. I will kiss at your command, as becometh a knight, and more, lest he displease you, so plead it no longer. She came near thereupon, and caught him in her arms, and down daintily bending dearly, she kissed him. They courteously commended each other to Christ. Without more ado, through the door she withdrew and departed, and he, to rise up in haste, made ready at once. He calls to his chamberlain, and chooses his clothes, and goes forth when garbed all gladly to mass. Then he went to a meal that meetly awaited him, and made merry all day, till the moon arose o'er earth. Ne'er was knight so gaily engaged between two dames of worth, the youthful and the aged, together they made much mirth. Basically, she's like, come on, can I just get a kiss? He's like, fine, you can tell me, you can command that of me, that's fine, that's still in the knightly manners, I can kiss you. So he grants that. Now, if you remember the wager, class, anything the Lord gets while he's out hunting, he will give to Gawain, and anything Gawain gains during the day, he must give to the Lord. Let's see where this goes. And ever the lord of the land in his delight was abroad, hunting by holt and heath after hinds that were barren. When the sun began to slope, he had slain such a number of does and other deer one might doubt it were true. Then the fell folk at last came flocking all in, and quickly of the kill they a quarry assembled. Thither the master hastened with a host of his men, gathered together those greatest and fat, and had them riven open rightly as the rules require. At the assay they were searched by some that were there, and 2 fingers' breadth of fat they found in the leanest. Next slit the aslot, seized on the erber, shoved it with sharp knife, and shore away the grease. Next ripped the 4 limbs and rent off the hide. Then they broke open the belly, the bowels they removed, flinging them nimbly afar, and the flesh of the knot they grasped then the gorge, disengaging with skill the weasand from the windpipe, and did away with the guts. Then they shore out the shoulders with their sharpened knives, drawing the sinews through a small cut, the sides to keep whole. Next they burst open the breast and broke it apart, and again at the gorge one begins thereupon, cuts all up quickly till he comes to the fork, and fetches forth the 4 numbles, and following after all the tissues along the ribs they tear away quickly. Thus by the bones of the back they broke off with skill, down even to the haunch, all that hung there together, and hoisted it up all whole, and hewed it off there. And that they took for the numbles, as I trow is their name in kind. Along the fork of every thigh the flaps they fold behind. Hew it in 2 they hie, down the back all to unbind. A lovely description of deer butchery there. But the head and the neck they hew off after, and next swiftly they sunder the sides from the chine, and the bone for the crow they cast in the bows. Then they thrust through both thick sides with a thong by the rib, and then by the hocks of the legs they hang them both up, and all the folk earn the fees that fall to their lot. Upon the fell of the fair beast they fed their hounds then on the liver, and the lights and the leather of the paunches with bread bathed in blood blended among them. Boldly they blew the prize amid the barking of dogs, and then bearing up their venison bent their way homeward, striking up strongly many a stout horn call. When daylight was done, they all duly were come into the noble castle, where quietly the knight abode in bliss by the bright fire set. Thither the lord now strode, where Gawain met with him, then free all pleasured flowed. Then the master commanded his men to meet in that hall, and both dames to come down with their damsels also. Before all the folk on that floor fair men he ordered to fetch their forthwith his venison before him, and all gracious in game to Gawain he called, announced the number by tally of the nimble beasts, and showed him the shining fat all shorn on the ribs. How does this play please you? Have I praise deserved? Have I earned by mine art the heartiest thanks? Yea, verily, the other answered. Here is the venison the fairest that I have seen in 7 years in the season of winter. And I give it you all, Gawain, said the good man at once, for as your covenant accorded, you may claim it as your own. That is true, he returned, and I tell you the same. What of worth within these walls I have won also, with as good will, I warrant, 'tis awarded to you. His fair neck he enfolded then fast in his arms, and kissed him with all the kindness that his courtesy knew. There take you my gains, sir. I got nothing more. I would give it up gladly, even if it greater were. That is a good one, quoth the good man. Greatly I thank you. 'Tis such, maybe, that you had better briefly now tell me where you won this same wealth by the wits you possess. That was not the covenant, quoth he. Do not question me more, for you've drawn what is due to you, no doubt you can have 'tis true. They laugh, and with voices fair their merriment pursue, and to supper soon repair with many dainties new. Basically, the guy comes back, gives Gawain the best venison he's ever seen. He's like, okay, Gawain, what you got for me? Gawain pulls him forward, gives him a good kiss, and he's like, well, that was great. Where'd you get that? Gawain's like, that wasn't part of the deal. I'm not telling. Nope, not gonna say. So 2 days now until the new year. Need that Majora's Mask, like, dun dun. 48 hours remain. Later by the chimney and chamber they were seated, abundant wine of the best was brought to them oft, and again as a game they agreed on the morrow to abide by the same bond as they had bargained before, chance what might chance, to exchange all their trade, whatever new thing they got when they gathered at night. They concluded this compact before the courtiers all, the drink for the bargain was brought forth in jest, then their leave at the last they lovingly took, and away then at once each went to his bed. When the cock had crowed and cackled but thrice, the lord had leaped from his bed, and his lieges each one, so that their meal had been made, and the mass was over, and folk bound for the forest ere the first daybreak to chase. Loud with hunters and horns o'er plains they passed apace, and loosed there among the thorns the running dogs to race. Soon these cried for a quest in a covert by a marsh. A huntsman hailed that first heeded the scent, stirring words he spoke to him with a strident voice. The hounds then that heard it hastened thither swiftly, and fell fast on the line some 40 at once. Then such a baying and babble of bloodhounds together arose that the rock wall rang all about them. Hunters enheartened them with horn and with mouth, and then all in a rout rushed on together between a fen pool in that forest and a frowning crag, in a tangle under a tall cliff at the tarn's edges, where the rough rock ruggedly in ruin was fallen, they fared to the find, followed by hunters who made a cast round the crag and the clutter of stones, till well they were aware that it waded within, the very beast that the baying bloodhounds had spoken. Then they beat on the bushes and bade him uprise, and forth he came to their peril against folk in his path. 'Twas a boar without rival that burst out upon them. Long the herd he had left, that lone beast aged, for savage was he, of all swine the hugest, grim indeed when he grunted. Then aghast were many, for 3 at the first thrust he threw to the ground, and sprang off with great speed, sparing the others, and they hallooed on high, and ha, ha, shouted, and held horn to mouth, blowing hard the rally. Many were the wild mouthings of men and of dogs, and they bounded after this boar, him with blare and with din to quell. Many times he turns to bay, and maims the pack pell-mell. He hurts many hounds, and they grievously yowl and yell. Hunters then hurried up eager to shoot him, aimed at him their arrows. Often they hit him, but poor at core proved the points that pitched on his shields, and the barbs of his brows would not bite at all, though the shaven shaft shivered in pieces. Back the head came hopping wherever it hit him. But when the hurts went home of their heavier strokes, then with brain wild for battle he burst out upon them. Ruthless he rent them as he rushed forward, and many quailed at his coming and quickly withdrew. But the lord on a light horse went leaping after him, as bold man on battlefield with his bugle he blew the rally call as he rode through the rough thickets, pursuing this wild swine till the sunbeams slanted. This day in such doings thus duly they passed, while our brave knight beloved there lies in his bed at home in good hap, in housing so costly and gay. The lady did not forget. She came to bid good day. Early she on him set, his will to wear away. So basically, we get this great hunting scene, very exciting. This massive boar, the hugest hog anyone's ever seen, thrashing out, throwing men to the ground, the lord in chase. Yeah, the hunting imagery is really exciting. You might think like, oh, well, why would he spend so much time describing these hunts? And then you remember that this would be, for an audience that would find that kind of scenery and pageantry, yet very much like the opening to Princess Mononoke. That, I mean, I don't think there's any, black taint spreading across this one. But, you've got this exciting, vibrant scene. And then we get the reminder right at the end. While all this is going on, our brave knight Gawain lying in bed. And the lady didn't forget. So now we go back to the castle and back to the action inside. In a lot of ways, this kind of story, the medieval courtly romance, or lay, as they're called, feels very modern because it was very much a precursor to modern novels. So this kind of story and storytelling, despite being, 600 to 700 years old, still manages to feel somewhat contemporary in the way the story itself is paced, like splitting back and forth between 2 points of view. That's still, a common device today. At this time, that would have been pretty novel. So it's very kind of cool to chart the development of, storytelling in that way. But now, back to the action. She passed to the curtain and peeped at the knight. Sir Gawain graciously then welcomed her first, and she answered him alike, eagerly speaking, and sat her softly by his side, and suddenly she laughed, and with a look full of love delivered these words. Sir, if you are Gawain, a wonder I think it that a man so well-meaning, ever mindful of good, yet cannot comprehend the customs of the gentle, and if one acquaints you therewith, you do not keep them in mind. Thou hast forgot altogether what a day ago I taught by the plainest points I could put into words. What is that? He said at once. I was not aware of it at all. But if you are telling the truth, I must take all the blame. And yet as to kisses, she quoth, this counsel I give you, wherever favour is found, defer not to claim them. That becomes all who care for courteous manners. Take back, said the true knight, that teaching, my dear, for that I dared not to, for dread of refusal. Were I rebuffed, I should be to blame for so bold an offer. Hey, Doc Pestis, welcome. Thank you for the raid. What were you playing tonight? Oh, yeah, I did the shout out right. Ooh, oxygen not included. An overdose of batteries. Actually, that would be very welcome to our hero at this point. We are reading Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, since that movie based on it just came out. Survival sim. Oh, similar to RimWorld. That is very cool. I will have to check that out. And welcome, Raiders. For those of you who don't know, I am Professor Bloom. I do reading streams, such as tonight, where I'm reading some wonderful medieval poetry, essentially. Quite an exciting story. I do music recording streams, where I will record multiple parts, one after another, until I've built up something like a barbershop quartet, or like classical music. And I do gaming streams as well, though I mostly just play custom Doom 2 Megawatts, because I will never run out of those to play. So thank you all for joining us. For those of you not familiar, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a medieval lay from the late 1300s that still reads shockingly like a modern story, I would say. It starts with a Christmas game at King Arthur's court. A huge green man on a huge green horse bursts in and essentially says, who is man enough to go blow for blow with me? You hit me once, take this big axe I've got, hit me with it, and a year from now, I'll hit you with it. Arthur's nephew, Gawain, leaps to the charge, because Arthur's kind of indignant that someone bust up in his court at this point, and says, I'll do it. And he cuts the dude's head right off. The big Green Knight stands back up, picks up his head, gets on his horse, and says, I'll see you in a year, Gawain, come find me. So at this point, it's Christmas. Gawain is staying with the Lord as he's been on the search for this Green Knight. The Lord goes out hunting every day, and while he is away hunting, his wife is trying to seduce Gawain, and that's where you come on the second day here. So she passed to the curtain and peeped at the knight. Sir Gawain graciously then welcomed her first, and she answered him alike, eagerly speaking, and sat her softly by his side. And suddenly she laughed, and with a look full of love delivered these words: Sir, if you are Gawain, a wonder I think that a man so well-meaning, ever mindful of good, yet cannot comprehend the customs of the gentle. And if one acquaints you therewith, you do not keep them in mind. Thou hast forgot altogether what a day ago I taught by the plainest points I could put into words. What is that? He said at once. I am not aware of it at all. But if you are telling the truth, I must take all the blame. And yet as to kisses, she quoth, this counsel I gave you, wherever favour is found, defer not to claim them. That becomes all who care for courteous manners. Take back, said the true knight, that teaching, my dear, or that I dared not do for dread of refusal. Were I rebuffed, I should be to blame for so bold an offer. Ma fay, said the fair lady, you may not be refused. You are stout enough to constrain one by strength, if you like, if any were so ill-bred as to answer you nay. Indeed, by God, quoth Gawain, you graciously speak, but force finds no favour among the folk where I dwell, and any gift not given gladly and freely. I am at your call and command to kiss when you please. You may receive as you desire, and cease as you think in place. Then down the lady bent, and sweetly kissed his face. Much speech then there they spent of lovers' grief and grace. Yeah, it is essentially just a weird night Batsu game. Like, he showed up at Christmas, was like, I've got a punishment game for you, Arthur. Are you game? Gawain's like, no, I got this one. It is essentially just a year-long punishment game. Gawain keeps trying to push, the man's wife away. And she's like, look, you gotta kiss me. I'm gonna make you kiss me. I would learn from you, lord, the lady then said, if you would not mind my asking, what is the meaning of this? That one so young as you are in years, and so gay, by renown so well known for knighthood and breeding, while of all chivalry the choice, the chief thing to praise, is the loyal practice of love, very lore of knighthood, for, talking of the toils that these true knights suffer, it is the title and contents and text of their works, how lovers for their true love their lives have imperilled, have endured for their dear one dolorous trials, until avenged by their valour, their adversity past. They have brought bliss into her bower by their own brave virtues, and you are the knight of most noble renown in our age, and your fame and fair name afar is published, and I have sat by your very self now for the second time, yet your mouth has never made any remark I have heard that ever belonged to love-making, lesser or greater. Surely you are that so accomplished and so courtly in your vows should be prompt to expound to a young pupil by signs and examples the science of lovers. Why? Are you ignorant who all honour enjoy? Or else you esteem me too stupid to understand your courtship? But nay, here single I come and sit, a pupil for your play. Come, teach me of your wit while my lord is far away. Hey, thank you for following, Doc de la Plaga. Very much enjoy that. Yeah, I absolutely love reading on stream. I've done a bunch of Sherlock Holmes reading. I read the general prologue to the Canterbury Tales in Middle English, but with translation on screen. For Gawain here, I am reading not in the original Middle English, because it is dreadfully confusing compared to, say, Chaucer's Middle English. I will show you what I mean by comparison of the same parts here. Ooh, Lupin would be great. Yeah, so if we look at the Gawain text here in Middle English, one, you'll notice immediately that there's letters we don't use anymore, such as the ash, the thorn, the yoch. Yoch is just fun to say. And sounds that we don't use so much anymore. Like, yeah. And then I wanted him about and wilde him bocht. En zeggen no signe of reset besedis nowhere, wat hichte bonkes and brent upon both have and rust. I get so tripped up with the yoke in the middle of the word. Not a simple one. It does sound great spoken, but I am not firm enough in my Gawain Middle English. If I hold on one moment, class. Grab to my point. Something like Chaucer's Middle English. I have a copy of the Canterbury Tales right here next to me. Or rather within arm's reach. Much, much easier to read. We'll start with the famous beginning of the general prologue. Sorry for no text on... Got a book in my hand. When that April with his sword is sauter, the doctor of March hath pierced to the rota, and bathed every vine in switch liquor, of which thereto engendered is the floor. When Zephyrus eke with his sweety breath inspired hath in every holt and heath the tender croppes, and the younge sona hath in the ram his half-courtesy rona, and small fool his maken melodia, that slepen all the night with open ear. So pricketh him nature in her courages, then long and folked going on pilgrimages, and palmeres for to saken strongest thrones, the fairne halways quoth in sundry londes, and specially from every shere's end of Anglond to Canterbury they wende, the holy blissful martyr for to sake, that him hath holpen when that they were sake. Thank you. Yeah, that Chaucer's Middle English is both much easier to say, but also much easier to understand if you can see the text while hearing it. It's still, you know, there's words we don't use anymore. One word I wish we did still use, Middle English word, ik, E-E-K. This means also, but I just kind of like saying it. But, you know, the vowels are pronounced differently, more like continental European, like Spanish vowels, A-E-I-O-U instead of A-E-I-O-U, you know, the diphthongs of modern English. So if you can shift the vowels back, pronounce more of the letters, like nicht, night, closer to German. You know, it really is like French, Latin, German had a baby together, which is because in 1066 the Normans invaded England, and that's how we got Middle English. But for Gawain, it was, whereas Chaucer was closer to Oxfordshire, this was more like West Midlands, closer to Wales, and the Gawain poet's Middle English is much more difficult to understand. So even reading in translation, it manages to maintain a very, you know, pleasantly archaic feel, let's say. So with that discretion over, rewind a bit to what the lady of the house was saying. Here single I come and sit, a pupil for your play. Come, teach me of your wit, while my lord is far away. She's on the side of his bed, saying, Hey, why don't you teach me what you know, big boy? My husband's out. He's out hunting. He'll be there all day. And just prior to this, we had a hunting scene, a very exciting hunting scene, where a boar, a giant, huge hog, is rampaging, and, you know, the party is scattering and fighting it. Let's see, can Gawain resist temptation? In good faith, said Gawain, may God reward you. Great delight I gain, and am glad beyond measure that one so worthy as you should be willing to come here. Oh, hold on. Our medieval music ran out. One moment, class. All right, we've got more medieval songs and dances. Okay, but basically, let's get back to Gawain trying to resist. In good faith, said Gawain, may God reward you. Great delight I gain, and am glad beyond measure that one so worthy as you should be willing to come here and take pains with so poor a man. As for playing with your knight, showing favour in any form, it fills me with joy. But for me to take up the task on true love to lecture, to comment on the text and tales of knighthood to you, who I am certain possess far more skill in that art by the half than 100 of such as I am, or shall ever be while on earth I remain, it would be folly manifold in faith, my lady. All your will I would wish to work as I am able, being so beholden in honour, and, so help me the Lord, desiring ever the servant of yourself to remain. Thus she tested and tried him, tempting him often, so as to allure him to love-making, whatever lay in her heart. But his defense was so fair that no fault could be seen, nor any evil upon either side, nor aught but joy they wist. They laughed, and long they played, and at last she him then kissed, with grace adieu him bade, and went whereso she list. Basically, Gawain here is mastering the art of polite refusal, saying, oh, lady, you honor me, but, I don't know the 100th of what you know about true love. It wouldn't be right for me to teach you that, though I would endeavor to remain ever your humble servant. He's basically sweating bullets and is like, I can't do this. Please go, please go. So then let's see how he fares now with the Lord coming back. Then, rousing from his rest, he rose to hear mass, and then their dinner was lain and daintily served. The livelong day with the ladies in delight he spent. But the Lord o'er the lands leaped to and fro, pursuing his fell swine that o'er the slopes hurtled and bit asunder the backs of the best of his hounds. Wherever to bay he was brought, until bowmen dislodged him, and made him maugre his teeth, move again onward. So fast the shafts flew when the folk were assembled, and yet the stoutest of them still he made start there aside, till at last he was so spent he could speed no further, but in such haste as he might he made for a hollow on a reef beside a rock where the river was flowing. He put the bank at his back, began then to paw, fearfully the froth of his mouth foamed from the corners. He whetted his white tusks. Then weary were all the brave men so bold as by him to stand, of plaguing him from afar, yet for peril they dared not come nigher. He had hurt so many before, that none had now desired to be torn with the tusks once more of a beast both mad and dire. Yeah, Dr. de la Plaga, earlier in the story, as Gawain sets off to seek the Green Knight, it's described that he is a knight in really, most perfect virtue. Failing never in piety or fidelity or faith, and chastity was mentioned as well. I mean, whether he's chaste or not, he's not trying to bed another man's wife while he's out hunting. And here's an interesting fact for you, class. If you listen to classical music older towards Renaissance era, the call of a horn, like a call, often is a stand-in in musical form for cuckoldry. Because when the husband was out hunting, that's when the wife would have her secret lover over. I think there's a Haydn symphony, the horn symphony. I think it might be either 36 or 40, horn signal. I would have to look it up. But it has as that its main motif. And pretty much everyone in the audience would have known, oh, this is a cuckoldry scene. Or if you think in something like Wagner's Ring Cycle, I don't know if that's where horniness comes from. That would be extremely funny if it was. Yeah, but a repeated hunting horn motif is often like medieval Renaissance slang for cuckoldry, because that would be what afforded someone the opportunity for infidelity. Fun little fact for you. But let's see, can they kill this dread boar? Till the knight himself came. The knight here referring not to Gawain, but the lord of the house. Till the knight himself came, his courser spurring, and saw him brought there to bay, and all about him his men. Nothing loath he alighted, and leaving his horse, brandished a bright blade, and boldly advanced, striding stoutly through the ford to where stood the felon. The wild beast was aware of him with his weapon in hand, and high raised his hair. With such hate he snorted that folk feared for the knight, lest his foe should worst him. Out came the swine and set on him at once, and the boar and the brave man were both in a melee in the wildest of the water. The worse had the beast, for the man marked him well, and as they met he at once struck steadily his point straight in the neck slot, and hit him up to the hilt so that his heart was riven, and with a snarl he succumbed and was swept down the water straight away. 100 hounds him caught, and fiercely bit their prey. The men to the bank him brought, and dogs him dead did lay. Le puso los cuernos. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. sounded the horn. It is interesting how phrases like that and imagery like that would have, I mean, it makes sense that it would have spread all over Europe, not just, Anglo-Europe. Le puso los cuernos. That's a good phrase to know now. Thank you. So the good knight has slain this massive boar. There men blew for the prize in many a blaring horn, and high and loud hallooed all the hunters that could. Bloodhounds bayed for the beast, as bayed the masters, who of that hard-run chase were the chief huntsmen. Then one that was well learned in woodsman lore, with pretty cunning began to carve up this boar. First he hewed off his head, and on high set it. Then he rent him roughly down the ridge of the back, brought out the bowels, burned them on gleeds, and with them, blended with blood, the bloodhounds rewarded. Next, he broke up the boar flesh in broad slabs of brawn, and haled forth the haslets in order all duly. And yet all whole he fastened the halves together, and strongly on a stout pole he strung them then up. Now with this swine homeward swiftly they hastened, and the boar's head was borne before the brave knight himself, who felled him in the ford by the force of his hand so great. Until he saw Sir Gawain in the hall, he could hardly wait. He called, and his pay to gain the other came there straight. So, if you had missed it, Gawain and this knight have another bet, another Christmas game. Really, as Kamiana pointed out, pretty much a Batsu game, where anything that the Lord gains in the day on his hunt, he will share with Gawain, but Gawain has to give him whatever he gained in the day back at home. Now, the green chapel that Gawain seeks, the man told him, is only 2 miles down the road, so please, rest here, you honor me with your presence. So now the Lord is excited to go show Gawain this massive boar that he brought down. The Lord, with his loud voice and laughter merry, gaily he greeted him when Gawain he saw. The fair ladies were fetched, and the folk all assembled, and he showed them the shorn slabs, and shaped his report of the width and wondrous length, and the wickedness also in war of the wild swine, as in the woods he had fled. With fair words his friend the feat then applauded, and praised the great prowess he had proved in his deeds. For such brawn on a beast, the brave knight declared, or such sides on a swine he had never seen before. They then handled the huge head, and highly he praised it, showing horror at the hideous thing to honor the Lord. Now, Gawain, said the good man, this game is your own by close covenant we concluded, as clearly you know. That is true, he returned, and as truly I assure you all my winnings I warrant I shall award you in exchange. He clasped his neck, and courteously a kiss he then gave him, and swiftly with a second he served him on the spot. Now we are quits, he quoth, and clear for this evening of all covenants we accorded, since I came to this house as is due. The Lord said, By St. Giles your match I never knew. You'll be wealthy in a while, such trade if you pursue. Now on the first night, when Gawain had kissed the Lord, he said, Well, where did you find that? And Gawain said, Nope, that wasn't part of the deal. I am not telling you that. I'm not telling you that your wife demanded I kiss her. So now to the third day of the bet. Or first the feasting. Then on top of the trestles the tables they laid, cast the clothes thereon, and clear light then wakened along the walls. Waxen torches men set there, and servants went swift about the hall. Much gladness and gaiety began then to spring round the fire on the hearth, and freely and oft at supper and later, many songs of delight, such as canticles of Christmas, and new carol dances, amid all the mannerly mirth that men can tell of, and ever our noble knight was next to the lady. Such glances she gave him of her gracious favour, secretly stealing sweet looks that strong man to charm, that he was passing perplexed and ill-pleased at heart. Yet he would fain not of his courtesy coldly refuse her, but graciously engaged her, however against the grain the play. When mirth they had made in hall as long as they wished to stay, to a room did the Lord them call, and to the ingle they made their way. Quick note on that word ingle. Ingle, or an ingle nook, is the kind of alcove alongside a fireplace. So if you think of a big hearth with maybe like a chair in the corner next to it, that's an ingle nook where that chair is laid. So Ingle here is just short for Inglenook. Fun word that I don't think we use enough, though it still is in usage in modern English. Inglenook is one of my favorite words to use for no good reason. Actually, as a fun point, the background I have for my Sherlock Holmes streams, you know, that kind of inviting looking fireplace hearth situation in Inglewood, I would imagine like a wooded spot next to a fireplace, but I would have to look that up actually. Hello, cat. My cat almost scared me half to death by brushing up against my leg when I wasn't looking. But, so the Lord calls them to a chamber. There amid merry words and wine, they had a mind once more to harp on the same note on New Year's Eve. But said Gawain, "Grant me leave to go on the morrow. The appointment approaches that I pledged myself to." The Lord was loath to allow it, and longer would keep him, and said, "As I am a true man, I swear on my troth, the Green Chapel thou shalt gain, and go to your business in the dawn of the new year, sir, ere daytime begins. So still lie upstairs and stay at thine ease, and I shall hunt in the holt here, and hold to my terms with thee truly, when I return to trade all our gains. For I have rested thee twice, and trusty I find thee. Now, third time pays for all, bethink thee tomorrow. Make we merry while we may, and be mindful of joy, for the woe one may win whenever one wishes." This was graciously agreed, and Gawain would linger. Then gaily drink is given them, and they go to their beds with light. Sir Gawain lies and sleeps soft and sound all night, his host to his hunting keeps, and is eagerly arrayed aright. After mass of a morsel he and his men partook. Merry was the morning, for his mount then he called. All the huntsmen that on horse behind him should follow were ready mounted to ride arrayed at the gates. Wondrous fair were the fields, for the frost clung there, in red rose-hued o'er the wrack arises the sun, sailing clear along the coasts of the cloudy heavens. The hunters loosed hounds by a holt border. The rocks rang in the wood to the roar of their horns. Some fell on the line to where the fox was lying, crossing and recrossing it in the cunning of their craft. A hound then gives tongue, the huntsman names him, round him press his companions in a pack all snuffling, running forth in a rabble them right in his path. The fox flits before them, they find him at once, and when they see him by sight they pursue him hotly, decrying him full clearly with a clamour of wrath. He dodges and ever doubles through many a dense coppice, and looping oft he lurks and listens under fences. At last, at a little ditch, he leaps o'er a thorn hedge, sneaks out secretly by the side of a thicket, weens he is out of the woods and away by his wiles from the hounds. Thus he went unawares to a watch that was posted, when fierce on him fell 3 foes at once all grey. He swerves them swift again, and dauntless darts away. In grief and in great pain to the wood he turns away. Then to hark to the hounds it was heart's delight, when all the pack came upon him, there pressing together. Such a curse at the view they called down on him that the clustering cliffs might have clattered in ruin. Here he was hallooed when hunters came on him, yonder was he assailed with snarling tongues, there he was threatened and oft thief was he called, with ever the trailers at his tail so that tarry he could not. Oft was he run at if he rushed outwards, oft he swerved in again, so subtle was Reynard. Yea, he led the lord in his hunt as laggards behind him, thus by mount and by hill till mid-afternoon. Meanwhile the courteous knight in the castle in comfort slumbered behind the comely cushions in the cold morning. But the lady in love-making had no liking to sleep, nor to disappoint the purpose she had planned in her heart. But rising up swiftly his room now she sought in a gay mantle that to the ground was measured, and was fur-lined most fairly with fells well trimmed, with no comely coif on her head, only the clear jewels that were twined in her treasure by 20s in clusters. Her noble face and her neck all naked were laid, her breast bare in front and at the back also. She came through the chamber door and closed it behind her, wide set a window, and to wake him she called, thus greeting him gaily with her gracious words of cheer. "Ah, man, how canst thou sleep? The morning is so clear." He lay in darkness deep, but her call he then could hear. So class, we get this really excellent parallel of the fox hunt going on. Now the fox, as they refer to him, Reynard, is cunning, crafty, darting in and out, avoiding all these traps, even though he's beset at every turn. And then we cut back to the castle, where a very different kind of fox entirely is being hunted. And we've got, this time, the lady coming with her hair down. It was obviously a very intimate gesture in a time when most people's heads were covered. She's wearing jewelry and not much else. And immediately, throws open the curtains and is like, "How can you sleep? It's so nice out." So let's see, can Gawain resist temptation a third time? In heavy darkness drowsing he dream words muttered, as a man whose mind was bemused with many mournful thoughts, how destiny should his doom on that day bring him, and be obliged his blow to abide without debate at all. But when so comely she came, he recalled then his wits, swept aside his slumbers, and swiftly made answer. The lady in lovely guise came laughing sweetly, bent down o'er his dear face, and deftly kissed him. He greeted her graciously with a glad welcome, seeing her so glorious and gaily attired, so faultless in her features and so fine in her hues that at once joy upwelling went warm to his heart. With smiles sweet and soft they turned swiftly to mirth, and only brightness and bliss was broached there between them so gay. They spoke then speeches good, much pleasure was in that play, great peril between them stood, unless Mary for her knight should pray. So we've got the narrator injecting his voice here, speech is good between them, their play was pleasant, but great peril between them stood unless Gawain starts saying his prayers. Can Gawain hold on to his chastity? That is the question. For she, queenly and peerless, pressed him so closely, led him so near the line, that at last he must needs either refuse her with offence, or her favours there take. He cared for his courtesy, lest a caitiff he proved, yet once more for his sad case, if he should sin commit, and to the owner of the house, to his host, be a traitor. God help me, said he, happen that shall not. Smiling sweetly aside from himself, then he turned all the fond words of favour that fell from her lips. Said she to the knight then, "Now shame you deserve if you love not one that lies alone here beside you, who beyond all women in the world is wounded in heart, unless you have a leman, more beloved, whom you like better, and have affianced faith to that fair one so fast and so true that you release your desire not, and so I believe now, and to tell me if that be truly so, I beg you, for all sakes that men swear by conceal not the truth in guile." The knight said, "By St. John," and softly gave a smile, "Nay, lover, I have none, and none will have meanwhile." So basically Gawain's saying, he's abstinence till he dies. He's just rebuffing her. He's like, "No, I don't have a lover. I don't have a girlfriend." The answer's still no. "Those words," said the woman, "are the worst that could be. But I am answered indeed, and 'tis hard to endure. Kiss me now kindly, and I will quickly depart. I may but mourn while I live as one that much is in love." Sighing, she sank down, and sweetly she kissed him. Then soon she left his side, and said as she stood there, "Now, my dear, at this parting do me this pleasure, give me something as thy gift, thy glove it might be, that I remember thee, dear man, my mourning to lessen. Now, on my word," then said he, "I wish I had here the loveliest thing for thy delight that in my land I possess, for worthily have you earned wondrously often more reward by rights than within my reach would now be, save to allot you as love-token thing of little value. Beneath your honour is it to have here and now a glove for a guerdon as the gift of Sir Gawain, and I am here on an errand in unknown lands, and have no bearers with baggage and beautiful things, unluckily, dear lady, for your delight at this time. A man must do as he is placed, be not pained nor aggrieved," said he. Said she, so comely clad, "Nay, noble knight and free, though naught of yours I had, you should get a gift from me." So basically, he's apologizing. "I'm sorry, I don't, you deserve the world, you deserve the nicest thing in my possession, but I came here by myself in a foreign land. I don't have, squires with me who have things. I'm sorry, I can't just give you a glove, that's no good." And she says, No, I didn't have anything of yours, but I'm going to give you a gift. Yeah, young people distracted by trivial things. A rich ring she offered him of red gold fashioned, with a stone like a star standing up clear that bore brilliant beams as bright as the sun. I warrant you it was worth wealth beyond measure. But the knight said nay to it, and announced then at once, I will have no gifts, for God, of your grace at this time. I have none to return you, and naught will I take. She preferred it and pressed him, and he her pleading refused, and swore swiftly upon his word that accept it he would not. And she, sorry that he refused, said to him further, If to my ring you say nay, since too rich it appears, and you would not so deeply be indebted to me, I shall give you my girdle, less gain will that be. She unbound a belt swiftly that, embracing her sides, was clasped above her kirtle under her comely mantle. Fashioned it was of green silk, and with gold finished, though only braided round about, embroidered by hand. And this she would give to Gawain, and gladly besought him, of no worth though it were, to be willing to take it. And he said nay, he would not, he would never receive either gold or jewelry, ere God the grace sent him to accomplish the quest on which he had come thither. And therefore, I pray you, please be not angry, and cease to insist on it, for to your suit I will ever say no. I am deeply in debt to you for the favor that you show, to be your servant true for ever in weal or woe. Do you refuse now this silk, said the fair lady, because in itself it is poor? And so it appears, see how small 'tis in size, and smaller in value. But one who knew of the nature that is night there within would appraise it probably at a price far higher. For whoever goes girdled with this green riband, while he keeps it well clasped closely about him, there is none so hardy under heaven that to hew him were able, for he could not be killed by any cunning of hand. The knight then took note, and thought now in his heart, would be a prize in that peril that was appointed to him. When he gained the green chapel to get there his sentence, if by some slight he were not slain, 'twould be a sovereign device. Then he bore with her rebuke, and debated not her words, and she pressed on him the belt, and preferred it in earnest, and he agreed. And she gave it very gladly indeed, and prayed him for her sake to part with it never, but on his honour hide it from her husband. And he then agreed that no one ever should know, nay, none in the world but they. With earnest heart and mood great thanks he oft did say. She then the knight so good a third time kissed that day. Then she left him alone, her leave taking, for amusement from the man no more could she get. When she was gone, Sir Gawain got him soon ready, arose, and robed himself in raiment noble. He laid up the love-lace that the lady had given, hiding it heedfully where he after might find it. Then first of all he chose to fare to the chapel, privately approached a priest, and prayed that he there would uplift his life, that he might learn better how his soul should be saved when he was sent from the world. There he cleanly confessed him and declared his misdeeds, but the more and the less, and for mercy he begged, to absolve him of all he besought the good man. And he assoiled him and made him as safe and as clean as for doomsday indeed, were it due on the morrow. Thereafter more merry he made among the fair ladies, with carol dances gentle and all kinds of rejoicing, than ever he did ere that day till the darkness of night in bliss. Each man there said, I vow a delight to all he is, since hither he came till now, he was ne'er so gay as this. So, after refusing all her advances, refusing a golden ring of immeasurable value, finally the lady presses upon him a green silk girdle, laced with gold, that she claims will protect the wearer from any harm. Gawain, knowing that he's going tomorrow to the Green Chapel to receive a blow such as the one he dealt the Green Knight a year ago, thinks, this might be my chance, this might save my life, maybe I won't get my head chopped off. But just in case, he goes to the priest and does a confession so that if he does die, his soul is shrived and he may, go to heaven. And with that off his mind, he spends the night making merry and having a great time. So let's see, will that work, class? Now indoors let him dwell and have dearest delight, while the free lord fares afield in his sports. At last the fox he has felled that he followed so long, for as he spurred through a spinney to espy there the villain, where the hounds he had heard that hard on him pressed, Reynard on his road came through a rough thicket, and all the rabble in a rush were right on his heels. The man is aware of the wild thing, and watchful awaits him, brings out his bright band, and the beast hurls it, and he blenched at the blade, and he would have backed if he could. A hound hastened up, and had him ere he could, and right before the horse's feet they fell on him all, and worried there the wily one with a wild clamour. The Lord quickly alights and lifts him at once, snatching him swiftly from their slavering mouths, holds him high o'er his head, hallooing loudly, and there bay at him fiercely many furious hounds. Huntsmen hurried thither, with horns full many ever sounding the assembly, till they saw the master. When together had come his company noble, all that ever bore bugle were blowing at once, and all the others hallooed that had not a horn. It was the merriest music that ever men hearkened, the resounding song there raised that for Reynard's soul awoke. The hounds they pay their fees, their heads they fondly stroke, and Reynard then they seize, and off they skin his cloak. Yeah, wouldn't that be a nice coincidence? If it just so happened that this coincidentally green girdle made someone not able to die when they wore it? That would be very, very helpful. And they have now taken the fox, killed it, and skinned it, and patted the dogs that did a good job hunting it down. And then homeward they hastened, for at hand was now night, making strong music on their mighty horns. The Lord alighted at last at his beloved abode, found a fire in the hall, and fair by the hearth Sir Gawain the good, and gay was he too. Among the ladies in delight his lot was most joyful. He was clad in a blue cloak that came to the ground. His surcoat well beseemed him with its soft lining, and its hood of like hue that hung on his shoulder, all fringed with white fur very finely were both. He met indeed the master in the midst of the floor, and in gaiety greeted him, and graciously said, "In this case I will first our covenant fulfill, that to our good we agreed, when ungrudged went the drink." He clasps then the knight, and kisses him thrice, as long and deliciously as he could lay them upon him. "By Christ," the other quoth, "you've come by a fortune in winning such wares, were they worth what you paid?" "Indeed, the price was not important," promptly he answered, "where as plainly is paid now the profit I gained." "Marry," said the other man, "mine is not up to it, for I have hunted all this day, and naught else have I got but this foul foxfell. The fiend have the goods, and that is price very poor to pay for such treasures of these you have thrust upon me, 3 such kisses so good." "'Tis enough," then said Gawain. "I thank you by the road." And how the fox was slain, he told him as they stood. With mirth and minstrelries, and meats at their pleasure, as merry they made as any men could be. Amid the laughter of ladies and light words of jest, both Gawain and the good man could no gayer have proved, unless they had doted indeed, or else drunken had been. Both the host and his household went on with their games, till the hour had approached when they part must all. To bed were now bound the brave folk at last. Bowing low his leave of the lord there first, the good knight then took, and graciously thanked him. "For such a wondrous welcome as within these walls I have had, for your honor at this high feast, the high king reward you. In your service I set myself, your servant, if you will, for I must needs make a move tomorrow, as you know. If you give me some good man to go as you promised, and guide me to the Green Chapel as God may permit me to face on New Year's Day such doom as befalls me." "On my word," said his host, "with hearty good will to all that I ever promised I promptly shall hold." Then a servant he assigns him to set him on the road, and by the downs to conduct him, that without doubt or delay he might through wild and through wood ways most straight pursue. Said Gawain, "My thanks receive, such a favour you will do." The knight then took his leave of those noble ladies too. Sadly he kissed them and said his farewells, and pressed oft upon them in plenty his thanks, and they promptly the same again repaid him. To God's keeping they gave him, grievously sighing. Then from the people of the castle he with courtesy parted. All the men that he met he remembered with thanks for their care, for his comfort, and their kind service, and the trouble each had taken in attendance upon him, and every one was as woeful to wish him adieu as had they lived all their lives with his lordship in honour. Then with link men and lights he was led to his chamber, and brought sweetly to bed, there to be at his rest. That soundly he slept then assert will I not, for he had many matters in the morning to mind, if he would in thought. There let him lie in peace. Near now is the tryst he sought. If a while you will hold your peace, I will tell you the deeds they wrought. So Gawain goes to part now, but he did not give the Lord all the things that he had on that day. He had 3 kisses, but he had a green girdle also. But at the lady's request, he has kept that hidden from her husband. And now he is being led in the morning to the Green Chapel, where he fears he faces his doom. Let us see, class, as we enter part 4, the final part of the story. You can see why they would adapt this to a movie so many times, especially recently, because this is, a tense, exciting tale with scenes of bravery and that air of certain doom hanging over it as Gawain marches, he thinks, to the headsman's axe. Now New Year draws near and the night passes. Day comes driving the dark as ordained by God, but wild weathers of the world awaken the land. Clouds cast keenly the cold upon earth, with bitter breath from the north biting the naked. Snow comes shivering sharp to shrivel the wild things. The whistling wind whirls from the heights and drives every dale full of drifts very deep. Long the knight listens as he lies in his bed. Though he lays down his eyelids, very little he sleeps. As the crow of every cock he recalls well his tryst. Briskly he rose from the bed ere the break of day, for there was light from a lamp that illumined his chamber. He called to his chamberlain, who quickly him answered, and he bade him bring his byrnie and his beast's saddle. The man got him up, and his gear fetched him, and garbed then Sir Gawain in great array. First he clad him in his clothes to keep out the cold, and after that in his harness that with heed had been tended, both his pauncer and his plates polished all brightly, the rings rid of the rust on his rich byrnie. All was neat as if new, and the knight him thanked with delight. He put on every piece all burnished and bright, most gallant from here to Greece for his courser called the knight. While the proudest of his apparel he put on himself, his coat armor, with cognizance of the clear symbol upon velvet environed with virtuous gems all bound and braided about it, with broidered seams and with fine furs lined wondrous fairly within. Yet he overlooked not the lace that the lady had given him, that Gawain forgot not of his own good thinking. When he had belted his brand upon his buxom haunches, he twined the love token twice then about him, and swiftly he swathed it sweetly about his waist, that girdle of green silk, and gallant it looked upon the royal red cloth that was rich to behold. But he wore not for worth nor for wealth this girdle, nor for pride in the pendants, though polished they were, not though the glittering gold there gleamed at the ends, but so that himself he might save when suffer he must abide bane without debating it with blade or with brand of war. When arrayed the knight so bold came out before the door, to all that high household great thanks he gave once more. Now Gringolet was groomed, the great horse and high, who had been lodged to his liking and loyally tended. Fain to gallop was that gallant horse for his good fettle. His master to him came and marked well his coat, and said, "Now solemnly myself I swear on my troth that there is a company in this castle that is careful of honor. Their lord that them leads, may his lot be joyful. Their beloved lady in life may delight befall her. If they out of charity thus cherish a guest, upholding their house in honor, may he them reward that upholds heaven on high, and all of you too. And if life a little longer I might lead upon earth, I would give you some guerdon gladly were I able." Then he steps in the stirrup and strides on his horse. His shield his man showed him, and on his shoulder he slung it. Gringolet he goaded with gilded heels, and he plunged forth on the pavement, and prancing no more stood there. Ready now was his squire to ride that his helm and lance would bear. "Christ keep this castle," he cried, and wished it fortune fair. The bridge was brought down, and the broad gates then unbarred, and swung back upon both hinges. The brave man blessed himself, and the boards crossing, bade the porter uprise, who before the prince was kneeling gave him, "Good day, Sir Gawain, and God save you." Then he went on his way with the one man only to guide him as he goes to that grievous place where he is due to endure the dolorous blow. They go by banks and by braes where branches are bare. They climb along cliffs where clingeth the cold. The heavens are lifted high, but under them evilly mist hangs moist on the moor, melts on the mountains. Every hill has a hat, a mist mantle huge. Brooks break and boil on braes all about, bright bubbling on their banks where they bustle downwards. Very wild through the wood is the way they must take, until soon comes the season when the sun rises that day. On a high hill they abode, white snow beside them lay. The man that by him rode there bade his master stay. For so far I have taken you, sir, at this time, and now you are near to that noted place that you have inquired and questioned so curiously after. But I will announce now the truth, since you are known to me, and you are a lord in this life that I love greatly. If you would follow my advice, you would fare better. That place that you pass to, men perilous hold it. The worst wight in the world in that waste dwelleth. For he is stout and stern, and to strike he delights, and he mightier than any man upon Middle Earth is, and his body is bigger than the 4 best men that are in Arthur's house, either Hester or others. All goes as he chooses at the Green Chapel. No one passes by that place so proud in his arms that he hews not to death by dint of his hand. For he is a man monstrous, and mercy he knows not. For be it a churl or a chaplain that by the chapel rideth, a monk or a mass priest or any man besides, he would as soon have him slain as himself go alive. And so I say to you, as sure as you sit in your saddle, if you come there, you'll be killed if the carle has his way. Trust me, that is true, though you had 20 lives to yield. Here he has dwelt now long and stirred much strife on field. Against his strokes so strong yourself you cannot shield. So at arriving at the Green Chapel, the squire leading Gawain there says, "You're gonna die. Everyone that rides by this place. Doesn't matter, if it's a gentle monk, if it's a mass priest. This guy kills them all. Anybody who comes there. If you had 20 lives, he'd kill you 20 times over." Yeah, everything builds that tension. And this squire who came to know Gawain during his stay is begging him, please, please don't go there. "And so, good Sir Gawain, now go another way, and let the man alone for the love of God, sir. Come to some other country, and there may Christ keep you. And I shall haste me home again, and on my honour I promise that I swear will by God and all his gracious saints, so help me God and all the halidom, and other oaths aplenty, that I will safe keep your secret, and say not a word that ever you fain were to flee for any foe I knew of." "Gramercy," quoth Gawain, and regretfully answered, "Well, man, I wish thee, who wishest my good, and keep safe my secret, I am certain thou wouldst. But however heedfully thou hid it, if I here departed fain in fear now to flee, in the fashion thou speakest, I should a knight coward be. I could not be excused. Nay, I'll fare to the chapel, whatever chance may befall, and have such words with that wild man as my wish is to say, come fair or come foul, as fate will allot me there. He may be a fearsome knave to tame, and club may bear, but his servants true to save the Lord can well prepare." Gawain says, "I appreciate it. I'm doing this. I would be a coward if I didn't." Gawain thinks he's going to his death, and he holds death better than being a coward. Death is better than breaking his knightly oaths. You remember, class, how earlier in the story we had such emphasis on what a goodly knight Gawain was. Here's that being paid off in truth. "Marry," quoth the other man, "now thou makest so clear that thou wishest thine own bane to bring on thyself, and to lose thy life hast a liking, to delay thee I care not. Have here thy helm on thy head, thy spear in thy hand, and ride down by yon rock side where runs this same track, till thou art brought to the bottom of the baleful valley. A little to thy left hand then look o'er the green, and thou wilt see on the slope the self-same chapel, and the great man and grim on ground that it keeps. Now farewell in God's name, Gawain the noble. For all the gold in the world I would not go with thee, nor bear thee fellowship through this forest 1 foot further." With that, his bridle towards the wood back the man turneth, hits his horse with his heels as hard as he can, gallops on the green way, and the good knight there leaves alone. Quoth Gawain, "By God on high, I will neither grieve nor groan. With God's will I comply, whose protection I do own." Hey, Atropa, good to see you. And 5x527. Yeah, you are right at the climax of the story now. Gawain is riding up right to the Green Chapel itself. Then he put spurs to Gringolet, and espying the track, thrust in along a bank by a thicket's border, rode down the rough brae right to the valley, and then he gazed all about. A grim place, he thought it, and saw no sign of shelter on any side at all, only high hillsides sheer upon either hand, and notched, knuckled crags with gnarled boulders. The very skies by the peaks were scraped, it appeared. Then he halted and held in his horse for the time, and changed oft his front to the chapel to find. Such on no side he saw, as seemed to him strange, save a mound as it might be near the marge of a green, a worn barrow on a brae by the brink of a water, beside falls in a flood that was flowing down. The burn bubbled therein as if boiling it were. He urged on his horse then, and came up to the mound, there lightly alit, and lashed to a tree his reins, with a rough branch rightly secured them. Then he went down to the barrow, and about it he walked, debating in his mind what the thing might be. It had a hole at the end and at either side, and with grass and green patches was grown all over, and was all hollow within, naught but an old cavern, or a cleft in an old crag. He could not name it aright. "Can this be the chapel green, O Lord?" said the gentle knight. "Here the devil might say, I ween, his matins about midnight." "On my word," quoth Gawain, "'tis a wilderness here. This oratory looks evil. With herbs overgrown it fits well that fellow transformed into green to follow here his devotions in the devil's fashion. Now I feel in my 5 wits the fiend 'tis himself that has trapped me with this tryst to destroy me here. This is a chapel of mischance, the church most accursed that ever I entered, evil betide it." With high helm on his head, his lance in his hand, he roams up to the roof of that rough dwelling. Then he heard from the high hill, in a hard rock wall beyond the stream on a steep, a sudden startling noise. How it clattered in the cliff as if to cleave it asunder, as if one upon a grindstone were grinding a scythe. How it whirred and it rasped as water in a mill race. How it rushed and it rang rueful to hearken. Then, "By God," quoth Gawain, "I guess this ado is meant for my honor, meetly to hail me as knight. As God wills! Wail away! That helps me not a mite. My life though down I lay, no noise can me affright." Then clearly the knight there called out aloud, "Who is master in this place to meet me at tryst? For now 'tis good Gawain on ground that here walks. If any aught hath to ask, let him hasten to me, either now or else never, his needs to further." "Stay," said one standing above the steep o'er his head, "and thou shalt get in good time what to give thee I vowed." Still with that rasping and racket he rushed on a while, and went back to his wetting, till he wished to descend. And then he climbed past a crag, and came from a hole, hurtling out of a mid-nook with his horrible weapon. A Danish axe, newly dressed the dint to return, with cruel cutting edge curved along the handle, filed on a whetstone and 4 feet in width. 'Twas no less along its lace of luminous hue, and the great man in green, still guised as before, his locks and long beard, his legs and his face, save that firm on his feet he fared on the ground, steadied the haft on the stones and stalked beside it. When he walked to the water where he wade would not, he hopped over on his axe and haughtily strode, fierce and fell on a field where far all about lay snow. Sir Gawain the man met there, neither bent nor bowed he low. The other said, "Now, sirrah fear, I true it tryst thee know." So it's not an actual chapel, it's kind of like a cave, a barrow in a hillside almost. Actually, I do have 2 pictures of places that scholars think the Green Chapel itself might actually be. So why don't... Actually, I'll pull those up quickly before we go on. There are 2 candidates, essentially. One being this, called Lud's Church. Yep, green was very much associated with Fae. And the other being a site called Wetton Mill, which is somewhat of a cave. So one of these 2 places was very likely the exact location being referenced as the Green Chapel. They don't look a particularly evil place to me, but you can see how... Now imagine you've walked through this wood, it's winter, everything's cloaked in snow, and you see a massive green man sharpening a 4-foot-wide axe. That's what Gawain has just seen. Will his courage maintain? Let's see. "Gawain," said that green man, "may God keep thee." On my word, sir, I welcome thee with a will to my place, and thou hast timed thy travels as trusty man should. And thou hast forgot not the engagement agreed on between us, as this time gone a 12-month thou took'st thy allowance, and I should now this new year nimbly repay thee. And we are in this valley now verily on our own. There are no people to part us, we can play as we like. Have thy helm off thy head, and have here thy pay. Bandy me no more debate than I brought before thee when thou didst sweep off my head with one swipe only. Nay, quoth Gawain, by God that gave me my soul, I shall grudge thee not a grain any grief that follows. Only restrain thee to one stroke, and still shall I stand, and offer thee no hindrance to act as thou likest right here. With a nod of his neck he bowed, let bare the flesh appear. He would not by dread be cowed, no sign he gave of fear. Oh yeah, this is, Kamiyana, this story really does feature, like, complete, magic, mysticism, daring, bravery, temptation. It's all there. That's what, courtly romances were full of this stuff. Another famous one, not an Arthurian tale, but was a lay written by a woman known as Marie de France called Bisclavret, and it's about a werewolf. Yeah, I would want to bring a lawn chair there, DA 527, but as Atropa says, Pennsylvania woods do have a disturbing number of missing persons cases. I mean, most woods do. People get lost in the woods and then just don't appear again. But yeah, there is so much magic and mysticism in medieval courtly romance literature. I think Bisclavret is a story about a werewolf, literally a werewolf. And it's really exciting in a way to think, we've been telling the same kinds of stories really forever. And that's why I think they still resonate so much with us. Yeah. And I feel like, once you get past the hurdle of the slightly antique language, once you actually hear it out loud, I think the story becomes much more accessible than most people would anticipate, You might think, well, how can a story from the late 1300s be exciting or relevant? What do I possibly have in common with anyone from back then? And the good news is people haven't really changed. We're the same people we've always been. We tell the same stories. We're excited by much the same things. We just tell the stories in different mediums. So I think once you get over that, hurdle of the language itself, it becomes very accessible. And I think by hearing it out loud, by having the story told to you instead of just reading it, it really comes to life in a way that makes it, very direct and relatable. It's like when you go to see, like Shakespeare in the Park or something. That language that might look dry on the page suddenly comes to life. But let's see, I think we only have now 10 parts remaining. I believe this is a 101 stanza poem. So let's see. Gawain strode right up, and he said, I will not grudge thee anything that follows. Just promise, one stroke, just like I did. I won't give you any hindrance. Bows his head, bares his neck, and basically says, bring it on. I'm here. I'm going to take it. I'm not a coward. Oh yeah, fairies were believed in not just by the common person, but even by many educated people. Then the great man in green gladly prepared him, gathered up his grim tool there Gawain to smite. With all the lust in his limbs aloft he heaved it, shaped as mighty a stroke as if he meant to destroy him. Had it driving come down as dour as he aimed it, under his dint would have died the most doughty man ever. But Gawain on that gisarm then glanced to one side, as down it came gliding on the green there to end him, and he shrank a little with his shoulders at the sharp iron. With a jolt the other man jerked back the blade, and reproved then the prince, proudly him taunting. Thou art not Gawain, said the green man, who is so good reported, who never flinched from any foes on fell or in dale, and now thou fleest in fear ere thou feelest a hurt. Of such cowardice that night I ne'er heard accused, neither blenched I nor backed when thy blow, sir, thou aimest, nor uttered any cavil in the court of King Arthur. My head flew to my feet, and yet fled I never. But thou, ere thou hast any hurt in thy heart, quailest, and so the nobler knight to be named I deserve therefore. I blenched once, Gawain said, and I will do so no more. But if on floor now falls my head, I cannot it restore. But get busy, I beg, sir, and bring me to the point. Deal me my destiny, and do it out of hand. For I shall stand from thee a stroke, and stir not again till thine axe hath hit me. Have here my word on it. Have at thee then, said the other, and heaved it aloft, and ratched him as wrathfully as if he were wild with rage. He made at him a mighty aim, but the man he touched not, holding back hastily his hand, ere hurt it might do. Gawain warily awaited it, and winced with no limb, but stood as still as a stone or the stump of a tree that with 100 ravelled roots and rocks is embedded. This time merrily remarked then the man in the green, So, now thou hast thy heart whole, a hit I must make. May the high order now keep that Arthur gave thee, and guard thy gullet at this go, if it can gain thee that. Angrily with ire then answered Sir Gawain, Why, lash away, thou lusty man, too long dost thou threaten. 'Tis thy heart, methinks, in thee that thou now quaileth. In faith, said the fellow, so fiercely thou speakest, I no longer will linger delaying thy errand right now. Then to strike he took his stance, and grimaced with lip and brow. He that of rescue saw no chance was little pleased, I trow. Quick aside, class. Phrases you've heard a bunch in this, like I trow, by my troth, that is essentially just medieval shorthand for in truth. So if you see trow, think truth. So he that of rescue saw no chance was little pleased, I trow, is the narrator saying, basically, Gawain, who saw no hope of rescue, was not pleased, trust me. Because now the Green Knight has set himself grimly, ready to deal a fatal blow. Lightly his weapon he lifted, and let it down neatly with the bent horn of the blade towards the neck that was bare. Though he hewed with a hammer swing, he hurt him no more than to snick him on one side and sever the skin. Through the fair fat sank the edge, and the flesh entered, so that the shining blood o'er his shoulders was shed on the earth. And when the good knight saw the gore that gleamed on the snow, he sprang out with spurning feet a spear's length and more, in haste caught his helm, and on his head cast it. Under his fair shield he shot with a shake of his shoulders, brandished his bright sword, and boldly he spake. Never since he as man-child of mother was born was he ever on this earth half so happy a man. Have done, sir, with thy dints, now deal me no more. I have stood from thee a stroke without strife on this spot, and if thou offerest me others, I shall answer thee promptly, and give as good again, and as grim be assured shall pay. But one stroke's here my due, as the covenant clear did say, that in Arthur's halls we drew, and so, good sir, now stay. Yeah, like they're cutting wrestling promos at each other, the Green Knight saying, I didn't hear that Gawain was a coward who shrinks from one measly little axe blow. And Gawain firing back, Yeah, well, I think you're scared, because you know I can take it. I need to learn that, like Scott Steiner at Sacrifice, the numbers don't lie. They spell doom for you. I don't know that. My wrestling is more like Macho Man Randy Savage era. Like, I can imagine Gawain being like, the cream rise to the top. But I'll leave the Macho Man impression for now. So Gawain has had his blow, has regained his arms, and said, if you hit me again, I'm going to hit you harder. The green rise to the top of the green chapel. From him the other stood off, and on his axe rested, held the haft to the ground, and on the head leaning, gazed at the good knight as on the green he there strode. To see him standing so stout, so stern there and fearless, armed and unafraid, his heart it well pleased. Then merrily he spoke with a mighty voice, and loudly it rang as to that lord he said, Fearless knight on this field, so fierce do not be. No man here unmannerly hath thee maltreated, nor aught given thee not granted by agreement at court. A hack I thee vowed, and thou'st had it, so hold thee content. I remit thee the remnant of all rights I might claim. If I brisker had been, a buffet it may be, I could have handed thee more harshly, and harm could have done thee. First I menaced thee in play with no more than a trial, and clove thee with no cleft. I had a claim to the feint, for the fast pact we affirmed on the first evening, and thou fairly and unfailing didst faith with me keep. All thy gains thou me gavest, as a good man ought. The other trial for the morning, man, I thee tendered when thou kissed my comely wife, and the kisses didst render. For the two here I offered only two harmless feints to make. The true shall truly repay, for no peril then need he quake. Thou didst fail on the third day, so that tap now take. For it is my weed that thou wearest, that very woven girdle, my own wife it awarded thee, I wot well indeed. Now I am aware of thy kisses and thy courteous ways, and of thy wooing by my wife. I worked that myself. I sent her to test thee, and thou seemst to me truly the fair knight most faultless that e'er foot set on earth. As a pearl than white peas is prized more highly, so is Gawain in good faith than other gallant knights. But in this you lacked, sir, a little, and of loyalty came short. But that was for no artful wickedness, nor for wooing either, but because you loved your own life, the less do I blame you. The other stern knight in a study then stood a long while, in such grief and disgust he had a grew in his heart. All the blood from his breast and his blush mingled, and he shrank into himself with shame at that speech. The first words on that field that he found to say were, "Cursed be ye coveting, and cowardice also. In you is vileness, and vice that virtue destroyeth." He took then the treacherous thing, and untying the knot, fiercely flung the belt at the feet of the knight. "See there the falsifier, and foul be its fate. Through care for thy blow, cowardice brought me to consent to coveting, my true kind forsake, which is free hand and faithful word that are fitting to knights. Now I am faulty and false, who afraid have been ever of treachery and troth breach. The two now my curse may bear. I confess, sir, here to you all faulty has been my fare. Let me gain your grace anew, and after I will beware." So basically, the Green Knight sent his wife to test Gawain, tried to seduce him, didn't work. Gawain rebuffed her full courteously, never insulting her, playing that fine game of manners in the courtly romance way. But Gawain failed in one thing, which was that he coveted his own life, and in that cowardice, he did not tell the man about the last gift he had received from his wife. So now in disgust, Gawain's thrown it on the ground, disgusted at himself for falling short of those lofty knightly ideals, even as the Green Knight tells him, you are the fairest in virtue that there ever has been. You are faultless here. But Gawain is so hot on it, throws it down. Let's see how the Green Knight responds. Who is not just the Green Knight. He was obviously the lord of the manor at which Gawain had been staying. Shocker to no one. Then the other man laughed and lightly answered, "I hold it healed beyond doubt, the harm that I had. Thou hast confessed thee so clean, and acknowledged thine errors, and hast the penance plain to see from the point of my blade, that I hold thee purged of that debt, made as pure and as clean as hadst thou done no ill deed since the day thou wert born. And I give thee, sir, the girdle with gold at its hems, for it is green like my gown. So, Sir Gawain, you may think of this our contest when in the throng thou walk'st among princes of high praise, 'twill be a plain reminder of the chance of the Green Chapel between chivalrous knights. And now you shall in this new year come anon to my house, and in our revels the rest of this rich season shall go." The lord pressed him hard to wend, and said, "My wife, I know, we shall soon make your friend, who was your bitter foe." Yeah, fairest in virtue until Galahad. Yeah, it's not your fault, bro. It's not your fault. Gawain acquitted himself pretty well. The man's wife came to him 3 days in a row, half naked, demanding him kiss and more. So, could have done worse, Gawain. You did pretty good. So let's see. Gawain then is offered to go back and feast the rest of the New Year season with him. Nay, forsooth, the knight said, and seized then his helm, and duly it doffed, and the doughty man thanked. I have lingered too long. May your life now be blessed, and he promptly repay you who apportions all honours, and give my regards to her grace, your goodly consort, both to her and to the other, to mine honoured ladies, who thus their servants with their designs have subtly beguiled. But no marvel it is if mad be a fool, and by the wiles of woman to woe be brought. For even so Adam by one earth was beguiled, and Solomon by several, and to Samson moreover his doom by Delilah was dealt, and David was after blinded by Bathsheba, and he bitterly suffered. Now if these came to grief through their guile, again 'twouldst be vast to love them well and believe them not, if it lay in man's power. Since these were aforetime the fairest, by fortune most blessed, eminent among all the others who under heaven bemused were too, and all of them were betrayed by women that they knew. Though a fool I now am made, some excuse I think my due. That's weak, Gawain. Don't blame the women. You're the one tempted. Don't blame her. Come on, man. Step up those knightly manners. But for your girdle, quoth Gawain, may God you repay. That I will gain with good will, not for the gold so joyous of the cincture, nor the silk, nor the swinging pendants, nor for wealth, nor for worth, nor for workmanship fine, but as a token of my trespass. I shall turn to it often when I ride in renown, ruefully recalling the failure and the frailty of the flesh so perverse, so tender, so ready to take taints of defilement. And thus, when pride my heart pricks for prowess in arms, one look at this Lovelace shall lowlier make it. But one thing I would pray you, if it displeaseth you not, since you are lord of yonder land, where I lodged for a while in your house and in honour, may he you reward, who upholdeth the heavens and on high sitteth. How do you announce your true name? And then nothing further. Then I will tell thee truly, then returned the other. Bertilac de Hautdesert hereabouts I am called, who thus may have been enchanted and changed in my hue, by the might of Morgan le Fay that in my mansion dwelleth, and by cunning of lore and crafts well learned. The magic arts of Merlin she many hath mastered, for deeply in dear love she dealt on a time with that accomplished clerk as at Camelot runs the fame, and Morgan the goddess is therefore now her name. None power and pride possess too high for her to tame. So basically Morgan le Fay was the old woman at his place. She's the one doing the magic to make him turn all green and big. She made me go in this guise to your goodly court to put its pride to the proof, if the report were true that runs of the great renown of the Round Table. She put this magic upon me to deprive you of your wits, in hope Guinevere to hurt, that she in horror might die aghast at that glamour that gruesomely spake with its head in its hand before the high table. She it is that is at home, that ancient lady. She is indeed thine own aunt, Arthur's half-sister, daughter of the Duchess of Tintagel, on whom Sir Uther after begat Arthur, who in honour is now. Therefore I urge thee in earnest, sir, to thine aunt return. In my hall make merry. My household thee loveth, and I wish thee as well, upon my word, sir knight, as any that go under God, for thy great loyalty. But he denied him with a, Nay, by no means I will. They clasp then and kiss, and to the care give each other of the Prince of Paradise, and they part on that field so cold. To the king's court on courser keen then hastened Gawain the bold, and the knight in the glittering green to ways of his own did hold. She turned me into a newt once. A newt? I got better. I mean, Bertilac doesn't seem terribly upset about this, you know. Morgan le Fay is held in esteem. It's not like he was unwilling to join in this scheme. Wild ways in the world Gawain now rideth on Gringalet. By the grace of God he still lived. Oft in house he was harboured, and lay oft in the open. Oft vanquished his foe in adventures as he fared, which I intend not this time in my tale to recount. The hurt was healed that he had in his neck, and the bright-hued belt he bore now about it obliquely like a baldric bound at his side, under his left arm with a knot that lace was fastened to betoken he had been detected in the taint of a fault. And so at last he came to the court again safely. Delight there was awakened when the lords were aware that good Gawain had returned. Glad news they thought it. The king kissed the knight, and the queen also, and then in turn many a true knight that attended to greet him. About his quest they inquire, and he recounts all the marvels, declares all the hardships and care that he had, what chanced at the chapel, what cheer made the night, the love of the lady, and the lace at the last. The notch in his neck naked he showed them, that he had for his dishonesty from the hands of the knight in blame. It was torment to tell the truth, in his face the blood did flame. He groaned for grief and ruth when he showed it to his shame. Lo, lord, he said at last, and the lace handled, this is the band. For this a rebuke I bear in my neck. This is the grief and disgrace I have got for myself from the covetousness and cowardice that o'ercame me there. This is the token of the troth breach that I am detected in, and needs must I wear it while in the world I remain. For a man may cover his blemish, but unbind it he cannot. For where once 'tis applied, thence part will it never. The king comforted the knight, and all the court also laughed loudly thereat, and this law made in mirth the lords and ladies that whoso belonged to the table, every knight in brotherhood a baldric should have, a band of bright green obliquely about him, and this for love of that knight as a livery should wear. For that was reckoned the distinction of the Round Table, and honour was his that had it evermore after, as it is written in the best of the books of romance. Thus in Arthur his days happened this marvel, as the book of the Brute beareth us witness, since Brutus the bold knight to Britain came first, after the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, I trow. Many a marvel such before as happened here ere now. To his bliss us bring, who bore the crown of thorns on brow. Amen. Honi soit quid mal pens. Sorry for messing up the Latin at the end there. Basically, Gawain gets back, tells all that has happened, and with shame in his face, blushing, he says, and this is the mark of my, inadequacy, the taint, I failed. And everyone else laughs at him and makes a law, okay, all knights of the knights of the Round Table wear a baldric of green, just like Gawain. So not only is the fault forgiven, but Gawain is counted among as the best of them. A true virtuous knight. Thank you for the Pachis. I do want to point out one quite funny thing that happened earlier in the story. As Gawain was leaving, Camelot, leaving King Arthur's court to go seek the Green Chapel. Yeah, made you dread your own death for 1 year, punked. The Green Knight was Ashton Kutcher this whole time. Here's the hidden camera, and here's the hidden camera. Yeah, when Gawain first left, you hear the narrator of the poem say, and on his way there, he fought, massive bears, and there was an ogre and some trolls, but I'm not going to tell you about that. Let's get on with the story. And then the same thing on the return trip, wild ways in the world Gawain now rideth. He vanquished his foes in adventures as he fared, which I intend not this time to recount. He's like, so he did all this cool stuff. I'm not going to tell you this time. But you can easily imagine, if someone was telling this story at court instead of it being, just a written copy, you could very well imagine, lords and ladies in attendance being like, oh, tell me about how Gawain fought the ogre. And then he would just, make up a story. Knights of the Round Table, Gaiden. So the best thing about Arthurian romances is nothing is true and everything is permitted. Like, it's fictional from the start. Maybe there was an Arthur in, Anglo-Saxon times, but from the very conception, these stories were strictly designed as pure fiction, courtly romance to live up to the highest ideals of the time. So, not only is there no, fixed, what's the real Arthur story, you can just make things up as much as you want, and it's totally cool. You can go whatever direction you want. And there were a lot. Yeah, Legends of Charlemagne, there's a lot of parallels. The Lays of Marie de France, there's a lot of parallels. Any other Breton lays from that time period. Here, hold on. Look off my shelf here. The Breton lays in Middle English. So we've got Sir Launfal, got Sir Degare, Emare. So these are all just strictly in Middle English. The Earl of Toulouse, Sir Gauthur. All of these stories basically could fold together in that same tradition. When these stories are being told at court, if someone wants to hear a story about one thing or another, whoops. Yeah, Charlemagne was a verifiable historical figure. But yeah, it was so long ago that, you know, who can say for sure where myth ends and where fact begins? Also, interesting note on Charlemagne, the late Sir Christopher Lee released 2 heavy metal concept albums around the life of Charlemagne. I think he was in his late 80s, early 90s when Christopher Lee started singing heavy metal music. And it was exactly as badass as it sounds. Christopher Lee is... Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let me pull this up. If you've never heard Christopher Lee, singing, he was an incredible singer. Yeah, exactly. You have those albums downloaded. I have the records on my shelf. Just gonna play a quick snippet of this because it really kind of beggars belief. That, essentially in his... Oh, that's way loud. In his 90s, he decided, yes, I think I will be a heavy metal musician now. There were other singers other than Christopher Lee. That's obviously not him. Look, if I make it into my 90s, I can only hope to have lived a life 1/10 as interesting as Christopher Lee's. Yeah. If you're curious, though, and Kamiana, if you said you're interested in those now, there are so many great medieval lays and romances from this time period that are just... He was a spy during the war. He was a spy during the war. He had a 7-decade-long film career. He is, second only to Bela Lugosi as the most recognizable Dracula. One of the only men who I think played both Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty at various turns. Legendary lifelong friendship with Peter Cushing. Just incredible life. Highly recommend. Oh, one more Christopher Lee oddity. In I think it was 1982 or 1983, he was in a movie musical produced by the same writer and composer as Rocky Horror Picture Show called The Return of Captain Invincible, where he played the villain, Mr. Midnight. Alan Arkin played the hero, Captain Invincible. And it is every bit as campy as Rocky Horror, but didn't catch on at all. Highly recommend it. Look up... let me just drop the link. It's also funny. You see what looks like, a young-looking Christopher Lee, and then you realize, oh, he was like 60-something here. Yeah, here's my, obsessive worship over Christopher Lee. Highly recommend you watch that movie if you like cheesy movie musicals. Way ahead of its time because it's like a superhero parody musical, which I don't think had an audience in 1982, but definitely does now. Might be my secret mission to get more people to watch this, but yeah, so thank you all for joining me for the high adventure that is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It is, I think, a very exciting story. It is full of, magic, romance in the courtly sense and literal sense, seduction, trials to see, can Gawain remain pure in the face of this temptation? What is the design of the Green Knight? Is this dastardly? Can he be trusted? It's just very exciting. Now I really want to go see the movie that's out currently, Green Knight, because it's been getting excellent reviews, and just looking at, some stills from it, the visual design looks spectacular. So I very much want to go see that. I'll have to see. Oh, was it good, AMVTuber? Because I really Really want to see it. I think Dev Patel plays Gawain, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, that just came out, I think, like the past month or two, yeah? That's one that I'm probably going to go find if there's a theater near me playing it, because that's one I would like to see on the big screen. Very A24. That's what I thought. Very much enjoy that. But I think, oh, for those who missed it earlier, I did want to point something out about the kind of poetic structure of this poem, was that even when this was written, this was essentially a throwback to an earlier style of poetry. So I'm sure you noticed that there's tons and tons of alliteration in these lines. You know, more than a rhyme scheme, it's that we have alliterative stanzas with a long portion, this, and then a short little quatrain at the end. That's called a bob and wheel structure. And this is a very kind of throwback to Anglo-Saxon poetry. Give me 1 second. I think I have a copy of Beowulf on my shelf. Let me grab that so I can show you what I mean. Oops, I pulled my headphone out. Give me 1 moment. Place that, and hopefully I didn't snap a cable. Yeah, now I've got my copy of Beowulf. So I will read you a few lines of one and then the other, and you can see how this was imitative of that older style. So, taking stanza 99 here. Yes, Lone Blarg got Gawain and the Green Knight, which we have just finished, unfortunately, but I'm just going to give a quick little lesson on how this style of poetry was. Oh, you're currently on campus. Excellent. This is a recap of how this was essentially a throwback to the more Anglo-Saxon declamatory style of poetry with strong alliterative pairs, usually 2 beats per line. Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, so if I read this stanza 99, listen in within the lines for all the alliteration and kind of the strong beats. Like, she made me go in this guise to your goodly court to put its pride to the proof, if the report were true that runs of the great renown of the Round Table, very much like Kenning's. He put this magic upon me to deprive you of your wits, in hope Guinevere to hurt, that she in horror might die, aghast at that glamour that gruesomely spake, with its head in its hand before the high table. You know, you can feel that kind of beat, whereas in something like the much older poetry, something like the Beowulf poet, be something like, then a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark, nursed a hard grievance. It harrowed him to hear the din of the loud banquet every day in the hall, the harp being struck into the clear song of a skilled poet, telling with mastery of man's beginnings, how the Almighty had made the earth a gleaming plain girdled with waters. So, very consciously, the Gawain poet, whose name we do not know, was calling back to that older style. There was kind of a small revival of, we'd call it alliterative verse, where instead of, sonnets that would rhyme, in a fixed structure, it was the internal structure of the individual lines that gave the poetry its meter and its flow. This translation that we've been reading was actually done by J.R.R. Tolkien. Besides his endeavors in fiction, he really was a linguist. That was his professional interest. And so I have a few different translations of Gawain and the Green Knight. The best are the Tolkien and one by Marie Boroff. And they both maintain the bob and wheel structure of the poem, and they both maintain that internal alliterative verse feel. There are looser translations out there that really just give you the meaning of the line. I find those pretty worthless, if I'm honest. Let me give you a comparison. I'll read the first stanza of each, one translation and the other. Yeah, Tolkien was a tremendous resource for Old English and Middle English as well, specifically the Middle English of the Gawain Pearl Patience poet. There were 4 poems collected on one manuscript copied by an anonymous monk, but scholars agree they were probably all the same author because of the common geographical features in the poem and the common dialect. There's an excellent Beowulf reading on YouTube by, I think his name is Benjamin Bagby. He built a lyre that would have been very similar to the ones we know about from Anglo Saxon times and declaims it in, almost like a song. I'll give you a few lines of each translation here, and you can hear how they kind of differ. Actually, while I'm at it, why don't I pull up the original Middle English to further confuse things and give reading that one another crack? Give me 1 second to bring this to the same stanza. Yeah, so first let's get a few lines of the original, if I can read it. Obviously, there's a bunch of letters we don't use anymore, such as the thorn, which is this guy here, the ash, the yoch is just fun to say. YOGH if you want to look it up. Sithen the sage and the assault was says to Troya, the borgs Britain and Brent to Brondis and the skiz. The Tulk that the Tramas of Trezon, the Hrot, what's trade for his treachery, the truest on earth, is what's the nearest the Athel and his high kinder. There you go. Did you have those on hand? I'd be very impressed if you know the alt codes for that. Then we've got, by side, the Tolkien translation. When the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, and the fortress fell in flame to firebrands and ashes, the traitor who the contrivance of treason there fashioned was tried for his treachery, the most true upon earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his renowned kindred who then laid under them lands, and lords became of well nigh all the wealth in the Western Isles. So when you look at them side by side here, let me move myself back up over here. When you look at the text side by side, you can see more clearly, Sithen the sage and the assault was ceased at Troy. Okay, when the siege and assault had ceased at Troy. That's just giving us time and place historical background, setting us back in Greco-Roman times, setting up this is how the world was established. Romulus went to Rome, named it after himself, peopled it. Far over the French flood, Felix Brutus made, Britain established, meaning Brittany in France. Now, if I read the other translation I have to hand, which is, a book right here in my hands, since the siege and the assault was ceased at Troy, the walls breached and burnt down to brands and ashes, the knight that had knotted the nets of deceit was impeached for his perfidy, proven most true. It was high-born Aeneas and his haughty race that since prevailed over provinces, and proudly reigned over well nigh all the wealth of the West Isles. Very similar. This one hews a little more closely to the original Middle English, but I think loses some of the essence of the poetry. You can't go wrong with either the Tolkien or the Boroff translation. Yeah, it's extraordinarily alliterative, very entertaining. Yeah, in case you ever have to type Odin and seem pretentious. Oh, I'm sure the 17th century was not a simple time by any means. And let's see, I know I posed this question to the class earlier, so if you did answer, let other people have a chance. But who can identify the castle behind me? This is your extra credit. So this likely wouldn't have been sung in the same way that Middle or Old English poetry was declaimed, but it likely would have probably featured a more chant-like rhythm. I would have to look up more about the performance practice, so to speak, of how these stories were told at court, because it's possible that troubadours may have carried them, and that would likely have been in song or chant. but I don't know. That is a castle in Wales. The Welsh flag makes that pretty clear. It is probably the most famous castle in Wales, which served actually an important function in World War II. It is Cardiff Castle, which has a more modern, by modern I mean like 17th century, castle off to the side of it on the same grounds. This is the Motte and Bailey style castle from, I think, the 1100s or so. And it's really remarkable. You can walk right up into it. So I think that will be all for tonight, class. Thank you all for coming after I had internet problems earlier. Literally, I had made my tweet, going live in, a couple minutes or whatever, and then my internet completely cut out, and I had to go figure out why. Turned out the power supply, which powered my router, had fried. I don't know if because of the, I've been right in the path of Tropical Storm Henri. Don't know if it was that. I didn't see any lightning, but if the surge protector fried, it didn't fry anything with it, so I had to replace that. Figure that out. I believe there's a stone bridge on the outside of Cardiff Castle. I have been there, but not in some time. Oh, I think you're thinking of the one set right on the water, whose name eludes me. But thank you all for coming. I hope that it was fun. I hope that it was educational without being too preachy. I know I get off on some tangents there. But I do hope that kind of my pausing in the text to summarize or explain things is helpful. And I do hope that you enjoyed, the cadence of the Middle English poetry itself, because it's quite unique, but it's quite understandable. So thank you all very much for attending today. Oh, thank you, Kamiyana. You flatter me. Let me see, what else have I got going on this week? Tomorrow, I will be embarking on a difficult journey to finish the Doom 2 megawatt I've been playing, Bloodstain. I have 3 maps left. That doesn't sound like it should take too long, but the last time I played, I got through maps 20 through 27, and it took me 8.5 hours and over 600 deaths. We are talking an extreme difficulty set of levels. And because of that, unfortunately, I have to do a punishment karaoke. I believe last time, class, you decided that I will be singing at least 2 Nickelback songs and Barbie Girl. So I will have those prepared, as well as another set of punishment songs, which I don't know if it's more punishment for me or you, honestly. I think I'll set it at 500 deaths. That seems like a lot for 3 maps, but we don't know. Oh yeah, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is absolutely riffing on this story, riffing on the story of Lancelot and the Sword Bridge. Monty Python and the Holy Grail is actually an extraordinarily intelligent movie. I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise. No one doubts that. But it is very, very well informed, let's say, in terms of literature. Yeah, so I will be... Yeah, Galahad and the Castle Full of Nuns. So I'll be finishing Bloodstain tomorrow and doing that punishment karaoke. If I die 500 or more times, you know what? I'll save that idea. I won't tell you what the punishment is. It'll be punishment for me and you. Oh yeah, they had virtually no budget for that film. Really, really shoestring. And their next feature film, for which they had more budget, Life of Brian, was almost entirely funded by George Harrison, the former Beatle rock star George Harrison, because he really wanted to see the movie. I think he gave them like £3 million or something. Not as an investment. He just wanted to see it. George had a great sense of humor. Yeah, so tomorrow I'll be finishing Doom 2. Wednesday night at 6 p.m., we will have the first rehearsal for the VTuber choir I've been putting together. I will be teaching the basses, their parts for the Mozart Ave Verum Corpus. That should only be about an hour. Thursday night, I will be doing one of my barbershop streams. And then Saturday afternoon, starting at noon Eastern, will be some karaoke, I think themed around anything musicals, Broadway, movie musicals, so Disney would count. So if you have any selections you would like to hear there, please let me know. I want to have at least, 40 to 50 songs I can pull up if I need to. Because I like singing a lot. And I like when people enjoy or have say in what I get to sing. So, thank you very much, all new followers. I really appreciate it. Doc Pestis, thank you for the raid. And speaking of raids, who should we go pay a visit to? Oh, the SpongeBob musical would absolutely count. I would just need to learn any of the selections from it. Let's see, who should we go intrude on? Thank you, Kamiana. I really appreciate it. Yeah, AIM VTuber, if you haven't been to one of my karaoke streams before, they're a lot of fun because I will. Oh, I've done opera karaoke before. That technically I could fold those into the musical if I want to. I mean, there's no rules. It is my stream. Let's see. Who should we go raid and what should. Oh, no. I know what the raid message is. The raid message is school's out. We can go with that for now. Does anyone have suggestions for a. Thank you so much, Kamiana. That means a lot to me. I really appreciate that. Let's see. Who should we go pay a visit to? Looking at people I know who are online. Power Nelson is playing Tekken 7. I think he's learning to use the hitbox. We've got. Oh, one of the people who will be in the VTuber choir, Dandalia, is playing Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Could pay her a visit. The gentlemen are here. I like that. If the ladies don't object. You know what? Why don't we stick with school's out? I like that one. I like dismissing class. I find that fun. Stick with school's out. And let's see. Ooh, you can see Nana Sekane is playing Grand Knight's History, which is a really good PSP game that didn't get localized. That's fun. I think I rated him the other day, though. Let's spread the love around a bit. You know what? Why don't we go pay Power Nelson a visit? He's another one who enjoys singing and reading. I know he does reading streams of old, like 1940s public domain comics, and that's a lot of fun. Yeah, so let's go raid Nelson and say school's out is our raid message. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I had an absolute blast reading, and I'm just very happy my internet worked. So let us go. Oh, something went wrong. Try running that action again. Okay, give me 1 sec while I figure out how to use Twitch. Okay, that's not working for some reason. Give me 1 moment, class. Don't know why that isn't working. Is there a raid command that I need to follow, or does he have raids turned off, or what? Hold on 1 second, class. I need to check if I'm doing something wrong. Okay, you can. that not work? Oh, yeah, Kamiana. It was the same writing team and composer as Rocky Horror, I believe. Christopher Lee is, obviously the tall, villainous one. Alan Arkin is the smaller guy. Yeah, when you hear his voice, you'll know immediately it's Christopher Lee. He's got that incredible, deep, bass growl. Let's see. Don't know why that raid isn't working. Yeah, I think it is /raid. Let me see if that works. I cannot raid that channel. I don't know. Okay, guess Nelson's got raids turned off. So let's visit someone else. Probably because he's playing a fighting game and that could be pretty distracting. Well, let's go visit Dandalia. She's playing Breath of the Wild and will be in the VTuber choir. Let's go with School's Out as our raid message. Thank you again, class, and I will see you next time.